Welcome to the Panza Panza Forum. In the Yoruba language, the word panza is usually injected into poetry to express an uncomfortable, uncensored, and inconvenient truth. The Panza Panza Forum is candid conversations about the life of African immigrants in America as it relates to their adaptation to their new home. While some may find it easy to integrate and can balance between retaining the original African culture while accepting the culture of their new home, many continue to struggle to find a balance between both worlds.
Hello and welcome to Panza Panza Live. This is a podcast where we discuss the lives of African immigrants and their assimilation into Western society as they raise younger generations in a country that is quite different from their own. We also explore the experiences of children of immigrants as they balance the African and Western cultures. We present to you this informative, interesting, and expansive dialogue about the intricate experiences of African immigrants in America.
Welcome to another episode of Panza Panza Podcast, the platform where we engage in deep conversation about the experiences, challenges, and resilience of African immigrants navigating life in the diaspora. I'm your host again, Kemi Seriki, and today we're so honored to welcome Brother Asare-Nova Felder, a community educator, organizer, cultural worker, a teacher, one of the most dynamic voices in the ongoing effort to build the bridge, the global African family. Raised in a richly multicultural home by a Kenyan immigrant mother, and an African-American father who was a Black activist, cultural leader, Asare-Nova brings a perspective rooted in lived experiences, scholarship, and commitment to community empowerment. And today we will speak about identity, heritage, the Black experience, youth development, Pan-Africanism, educational challenges, the relationship between African immigrant and African American, and his leadership at BABA Inc. BABA means Building Africa and Black America, an organization dedicated to unity, culture, and development in a global African community. Thank you again, Brother Asare, for joining me. I really appreciate it. I've been looking for this conversation for a long time. Thank you for coming here.
Yes, no problem. So where do we begin?
So to begin, I want the listener to understand your foundation, your story, your family, where your identity and your journey begins. So let's start by you sharing where you were born and a little bit about your parents' background.
Okay, so I was born in Queens, New York, 1977 in November. I guess it was real cold at that time back here in New York City in those days in November. And I was born and raised here in New York City with influence of course, Harlem, the designated African African capital of Black folks in this country, also in Brooklyn. And my parents, first I'll start with my lovely mom. My mom is still with us. She was born out on the outskirts of Nairobi, Kenya, in the mid-50s. At that time, Kenya was still a colony. Kenya did not get its independence until 1963, the leadership of people like Jomo Kenyatta and Odinga. So she has that background, and legend has it that my Guka grandfather was a Mau Mau. He took the oath. Legend has it. I don't have any documentation to prove otherwise, but that's what the family law says about him. And my grandmother, my shosho, was the queen mother of the family. She had over 10 children, and she held the family down. She was a farmer. My grandfather was a draft architect for the city of Nairobi after their independence. And my grandfather was a real, intelligent guy. So he basically bought up a lot of land over, years, putting his pennies together. And as my grandmother was, raising the family and doing all of the great things that usually our feminine counterparts have to do while the man is out in the world dealing with all of the other things. But he bought land. And so that kind of set my family in Kenya up to in some good way up until this day, we thank the ancestors. And so my mom grew up at that time, very rural environment, on a farm, going to boarding school with Catholic, what do you call them? Catholic nuns and priests as their teachers.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
highly disciplined, still from the colonial era. And I see how that life has shaped her. And more importantly, I see that how that life has shaped me and my siblings. So we are always thankful for mom. And my parents actually met in Kenya. My dad was her teacher. My dad, Dr. Jack Felder. My mother's name is Hortensia Felder. My dad, his name is Dr. Jack Felder. He was a teacher in the rural teaching service, Kenya at that time, into the early 70s, from the late 60s into the early 70s. And that's where they met. But my dad's story is very different because my dad is born in the 30s here in the United States of America in segregated Confederate territory, South Carolina. Family law has it from his mouth that it was difficult growing up under that segregation. My dad remembers things as a little boy, like he referenced it, White War II, men fighting amongst themselves for the global resources in the world that are usually in the lands of people of color. And he remembers the end of the war, and legend has it in the family, and through him, that he was almost a victim of lynching and all of these things when he was a little boy. So that life was very difficult. My father grew up not knowing his father, not having many of the amenities that many of us today think are just like average, normal, right? And I think many people can't really understand that, even that have the American African experience, born and raised here, because the times are so different. My grandmother, his mother, Reverend Elizabeth Felder, she was born on a tenant farm. Which is sharecropper. Her father, my great grandfather, Richard Felder, was a sharecropper. So my grandmother was born around the same time as Dr. Clark in 1915, Sumter County, Edgefield, South Carolina. So our family is dealing with all of this, my grandmother being born roughly 50 years after the end of slavery, my dad roughly being born, about 70 years or so after the end of slavery. So it was very difficult life for them. But my dad was just cut from a different cloth. Learning now the family history, his father, finding out the roots of his own father, he was a student at Allen Benedict University or college. Allen University and Benedict College, two separate schools. They students took classes at each, and he was a student there. But my father must have had something in him from just his own life experience and what he had inherited from his father and from his mother. And he decided as a little boy, maybe like around 11, 12, he said, I'm gonna push myself. I love science and I'm gonna become a scientist. So he graduated in I think 1961 from Allen University. I still have his degree in the safe, right? Bachelor's degree. He said, either to be Black in America, to be successful, really, you're going to, as a professional, he was like, that was open to us was like a mortician, teacher, or preacher. And my father decided that religion was not for him, even though his mother was a reverend and living that life and raising that life. And Allen is named for Richard Allen, founder of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. He decided, I'm a scientist, so I believe in science and I want to go on that path. So he said, I'm going to become a science teacher. And later on, his journey took him to becoming a scientist with the U.S. military because he was drafted at the early stages of the Vietnam War. And that changed his life. Two FBI agents, because my family came up here in the late 40s, early 50s to New York, to the Bronx. And my dad, and during school, he would come to New York. But my grandmother was here, and he was still in school. And my uncle, his elder brother, Richard Felder, who was named for my great grandfather, was still in South Carolina, hustling, making it. But my father was in school. So his big brother, 6 years elder, taking care of him, making sure he was good. So when my father would come summers, he would work in Jersey at a mental health facility that they used to say a crazy house, right? During the summers, because, the New York money was real good. So in the summers, he would come. I think he was in between, like this is after he graduated college. He was at that summer job waiting to go back to his teaching job at Lincoln High School in Columbia, South Carolina, where he's from. And he comes home to grandma's house and he comes to the apartment on Eagle Avenue in the Bronx to two FBI agents. Yeah. So what had happened was like we're not in the internet age at that point, right? This is 1962, 1963. And they thought he was a draft dodger, right? Because they were sending the mail, the snail mail as we call it today, to the project's apartment in South Carolina. It was called, trying to think of the name of that project. It's gone now. Saxon Homes. Saxon Homes. That was the name of it in Columbia. They were sending the mail there, and you had been drafted. You have to show up the time to one of the recruitment centers, wherever they tell you when you're drafted. You have to answer it. It can't just be you don't answer it. Either you can, like some people, like our current executive in the White House, your family got money, you could play the three-card Monte game and move the shells around and not go. Or maybe you have an illness and you don't qualify, right? So I guess they had been trying to reach him for a matter of months while he was in New York, and I guess they did the investigation that his mother lives in New York, and they came to his mother in New York office, I guess from Manhattan, came to the house and, asked him what was going on. And my dad at that time, it must have been like 24, 23, young man. He said, no, no, no. Not that he was some big American patriot, but he said, no, I'm not dodging the draft. I didn't know. I was here. I've been in New York the whole summer. So anyway, he told them, he said, look, I know y'all got this thing going on in Vietnam, but I'm a black man. I do not want to risk my life for this country in that way. What can we, no, seriously, this is his story. He's told it many times, and I'm sure it's YouTube. We got video of it somewhere. And he said, look, what can I do? I don't want to be stationed in the South. I don't want to go to Vietnam, but what are my options? So, after he talked to the military recruiters, they looked at his record. So they saw that he had a degree in biology, mathematics, physics. He had all of these different minors and majors. As an undergraduate student, they said, do you think you could be a scientist? He said, yeah, of course. Like, I'm a scientist already. Like, I'm a teacher, of course. I get to train. I'll do whatever I got to do. So they said the only thing is all of the Army bases where we do training for privates is in the South. So based on where your South Carolina address, you would have to go to Fort Jackson. So he went to basic at Fort Jackson and said, you have to do the 6 weeks. And if you qualify for all of these different things, you might have to do longer. In short, my dad did 6 weeks, and they stationed him at different military science facilities across the Northeast and Chicago. And he played that part of his life out as safely as he could. He's never went to Vietnam, thankfully for the family. After he did, I think you had to do 2-year active service, and then you would have to do 2 years inactive, something like that. I don't know all the details, but I'm not a veteran, I'm not a military guy. So he did that, and through, I think, a professor he had at Allen, I think the guy was I don't know if the guy was German or Asian, something like that. But the guy had some connections to Germany. So my dad, still being in his 20s, was saying, well, what are my options in Germany? So ex-professor said, I think you would be a good candidate to go to school in Germany and potentially get your PhD if you would want. I have connections at University of Berlin, and he went to Germany on a military flight, because even when you're inactive, you're still right. You're still active. 2 years inactive. They can call you back, so you still have all your benefits, all your privileges. So he took a military flight to West Berlin, what it was named, the western side of the city at the time, and he went to university, and administration and advisors told him he would have to redo his American bachelor's degree. I guess because it's from an HBCU, maybe it's not accredited, or they didn't have, at that time, America's education wasn't what it is today, right? Not saying that it's anything. So he went, he was disappointed, still being in his mid-20s. He said, you know what? He saw this big company. He was like, I've heard of that company. I think it's a science company. I got this military training as a scientist. Let me just walk in there and see if I can get a job. Because he was dejected as a young guy. Usually when you're younger, you're naive but hopeful at the same time. So you're like he thought it was just going to work out. And so he went to the company, and the company's name is Siemens firm, right? Siemens. We know it's like a tech company now. They still do some different things, not just in tech, but in, biochemical engineering and so forth. And he walked into the office, and he asked the receptionist, are you guys hiring? He said, that was my youthful naivete and hopefulness. And she said, you American? She said, soon, because he's black. And his accent. He said, yeah. He said, you active military? He said, no. He said, I'm a veteran now. She said, hold on. And she went to the back. She got her supervisor, that's the hiring manager. They sat down in his office and he asked him, questions. He said, I'm looking for a job. He asked him, what's your training? My dad said, I was a military scientist for 2 years. I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry, biology. So that was my focus. And he said, you're looking for a job. He said, would you learn German? I'll go to school for it. I guess I can learn it. And he said, okay, this is what we'll do. You got to go to German language school for 6 months. So you learn the basics of German. It's very similar to English, to speak and to write. And I want you to become a translator of scientific documents from German to English and English to German. He did the job. He did it. He stayed in Germany for 5 years to the late 60s. What really drove him to leave Germany was the death of Dr. King. So 1968, April 4th, Dr. King was assassinated at the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee. And so that, not just for America, that was a loss for the whole world. But the difference in the coverage of American journalism and European journalism, and it continues to this day, European journalism is more authentic, right? It's not propaganda for America. Even though they might be allies, they share blood and kinship and culture, they tell the truth. They showed in Germany, white people in this country, Caucasians, European Americans, celebrating on television, German media, the death of Dr. King. My dad said, no way in hell I'm going back to America. He said they killed this man of peace, this man of doing the right thing, opposed the war in Vietnam, saying all the right things and doing all the right things for his people, but also for America. Then he said, I got to get out of Germany too. He said, no matter how we look at it, Germany's a white country. I can live here. They're not really as vehemently racist, as America is. They're really against racism. At that time, they had all of these laws against, racism. There was no neo-Nazi movement at that time, alt-right or whatever, white nationalist movement in Germany at that time. And he had, and this is the part of the story I think you're gonna love the most, Sister Sariki, is in Germany, he met Africa. Now let me explain. He is African American, raised in the South. You're not having the experiences that us, Black New Yorkers are having, right? People from the Caribbean, people from here, people from the continent, people from different places in the world, right? It's very Black and literally white. So he didn't really have a lot of touch points with people from the continent of Africa, even though somewhere in his nascent consciousness, he knows I'm a Black man, I'm an African. So he understood that, even though they're calling us colored and Negro. There was a town in many southern places they call Little Africa, right? Because that's where the Black people live. So he knew that, but not having those cultural touch points, he didn't have it. So he met people from Kenya, people from Nigeria, people from Uganda, people all going to school, working, doing all the things that he was doing, right? And he bonded with them, right? With all of those countries and people and different nationalities that exist, right? He bonded with them. And this is this is still in the 60s, right? So this is a very revolutionary time for our people globally in the United States, on the continent of Africa. So many, I would think the majority of African countries got independence in the 60s. So, and that's why so many students and professionals were all over the world. So he was even friends with the late Prime Minister of Kenya, Raila Odinga. He was the best man at my mom and dad's wedding. They were friends. He lived in East Berlin. They were good friends. I even talked to Mzee Odinga after my dad passed away. My mother's friend at the embassy here in New York got us the number. We called, we spoke to him, and God rest the dead. He's passed on a few months ago, but they were friends. But he had another friend, two other friends that were instrumental in his African development and why he wound up in Kenya, I believe. Right? He had a friend named Dr. Osaga Odak, who went to school in Russia. He met him later on in Kenya, but he was very instrumental in him and his consciousness. And Dr. Odak worked with Louis Leakey and Richard Leakey on much of these anthropological finds of human beings, our ancient ancestors, many called the hominids, right? But another brother named Nguor, James Nguor, Kikuyu from Kenya, right? As we know, Raila Odinga is a Luo, the same people as Obama's father. But brother, I think he was like an engineering, sanitation, health specialist in Germany. So he'd always talk to my dad about Kenya. Oh, you got to come to Kenya. You got to come to Kenya. You got to come to Kenya, right? You keep talking about you want to leave and go, leave the white man's land and come to the black man's land. You got to come to Kenya. Don't go nowhere else. You know how it is, right? We always big up the places we from.
Yeah.
So he said, don't worry, I'll get you a job. So, after this experience he had on April the 4th, seeing all the negativity that he witnessed as a young black man and living in Germany at that time, and saw what America really was, right? And growing and building with his African brothers and sisters in Germany. He said, like I said, he said he wanted to go, so he left. I think in 19, I think shortly, late 68, 69, he went and he promised him a job in Kenya when he got there. So he booked his tickets and all of this. Remember, this is 1968, 1969. This is not 2025. So it's not like, we got international flights the way you have it now. So, he booked his travel, and he told us that he had to, I think he drove to Greece. I think he drove to Greece and went to Athens, and he took a ferry or boat, a ship to Egypt. Took a ship to Egypt. And there's a reason why I'm telling the story this way. There's a reason why. So he took his ship to Egypt, and he stayed in Egypt for 6 weeks. And what he found in Egypt blew his mind. He was already consciousness growing, right? But when you have those visceral experiences and touch points in your life, physically with the place and its people, it really educates you in a different way than you sitting with a book, right? So he saw on the walls, or he's taking all these tours. He's even living in the bush with the Nubians. He's doing all these things over several weeks before he's getting down. He's making his way by bus and all these things down to Kenya. And people don't understand how vast Africa is. Africa is not North America. Africa is not South America. It is the largest habitable continent on the planet. Go from Cairo to South Africa, from Cairo to Cape Town is not a 6-hour flight, right? To go from Mauritania to Nairobi, it's not a 6-hour flight. It's 54 countries, nearly 12,000 square miles. So it took him time. But anyway, he saw his face on the walls. So he's in culture shock. He's seeing his face in the colors on the wall. He's seeing his face, in the statues, and even with the noses broken, that's an African because of the way the structure of the face is, right? If I turn to the side, that's the Sphinx. You turn to the side, it's the Sphinx. That's the same, phenotype. And so that really challenged his thinking, but made him become more conscious. And he went on all those tours, the Egyptian Museum. We stayed with the Nubians down in Aswan. We went to Abu Simbel. He did all of these things, living with the people. He just, that changed him. And eventually he gets to Kenya, and now he's an immigrant again. In Germany, he was an immigrant. Very different going to Kenya, and newly independent, 5 years, 6 years. It wasn't as easy for him as he thought it was going to be. So my dad had to play the survival game as an immigrant in Kenya. So working here and there before he got a permanent gig, but also with immigration. Every country controls its borders, which it should. He would have to leave for like a few weeks or months, go live in Tanzania, and then come back to Kenya. And he told me at one point, he said, you know what? He was thinking about, well, wherever I get the opportunity first, I'm going to take it. Thank God he got an opportunity in Kenya for a job, because otherwise I wouldn't have been born, right? So one thing in Tanzania, one of the greatest experiences that he had was that he lived with the great scholar, Dr. Walter Rodney, on the campus, the African Guyanese scholar. And we know he's written Grounded with My Brothers. He's written How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And so that was one of, he had adventures. Sometimes we go through his old pictures. He has pictures of, Haile Selassie, Jomo Kenyatta, Ugandan president, our brother, Idi Amin. So has pictures of them. He's at the parade. Sometimes he's telling us he's going to parties. He's meeting these dignitaries. So he had a really Pan-African experience as a young American, African American, Black man born in America, in Kenya, in Tanzania, and in Egypt. That, and why I'm telling a story like that, because, and I'm getting emotional about it, because talking about it, sometimes you know it, but talking about it, you see the touch
Yeah.
points, you see the connections.
Yeah.
But I'm telling the story that way because that's how this mentality that I've developed and I have is because of that experience. If my dad did not go through those things, I don't get born. We don't
Yeah.
have this mindset. That's why, so that's just a little bit about my family background. And later on, I got some new information that I just found out, and I got some other information that we'll bring out through the conversation. But yeah,
But
I just wanted
that's
yeah,
so powerful background that your father came during the time when things were so difficult,
very
for
difficult.
people of
Yeah,
African descent. Whether
yes.
you're talking about colonization and
Hmm.
segregation in America, slavery, name it, everything. And they were able to pull through. The connection that they had at that time
Hmm.
was so powerful. And I mean, I can't even imagine growing up in that kind of household from a mother from a Kenya and a father who is African American who have explored different part of the world. And he was able to connect with people, whether it was in Germany, in different part
Yeah,
of Africa,
yeah,
and being able to
absolutely.
explore those areas. So what was it like growing up in a home shaped by two powerful
Oh God.
identities? Your
So
Kenyan mother, African American father, who has a deep involvement in
mhm.
activism.
So I'll say I don't think it was just like normal to us, right? One thing that I never questioned, and I'll lead with this, is that I never questioned my African identity. That's one thing I think that having an African mother gave me. Like I didn't have these, and I see my brothers and sisters that are, both parents are African American, American African, as I like to say. Parents go through these struggles, and we can look at it historically, we can look at it politically, from an identity perspective. But growing up in that household was cool, man. Like, my grandmother lived with us. By the time I was born, my grandmother was in her early 60s. So she was like became, our caretaker. And my mom didn't really work until I got into high school. So that was like the 90s, right? So we were raised in a very rich African American, Kikuyu African household. Like, we saw all of these things as normal. My mother speaking Kikuyu and Swahili with
Mm,
her friends on the phone. It was very hard for me and my brother to become fluent because my mother didn't have somebody to talk to. So we didn't pick the language in that way, even though we do carry some
mhm.
understanding of the spoken language.
Yeah.
So we had that. Like my mother's African. Wow, I loved it. Right. And my dad is African American. My grandmother's a pastor. So we were raised in the church too. The colored Methodist
Yeah.
Episcopal tradition, right? So we're going to church, with the bus trips with the cold chicken and the potato salad and the pasta salad and going to Atlantic City and going to Allen, Pennsylvania. And we did all of those things. Like, so I just never looked at it as a unique experience because as a child, you're just living what your parents present to you. A few other things, but specifically, like at that time, so we were raised in Queens. I was raised in a garden apartment in Springfield Gardens. And like we were a community, and everybody around, we had Caribbean people. My mother's best friend, after we came back from Africa in 1982, I'll talk about that when I was 4 years old. I'll talk about that in a minute. But best friend was from Haiti, right? Older sister with, her children were like 18, 15, older than us. We were little. Me and my brother were like 3 and 4 years old. So we had Jamaican neighbors, right? We had African American neighbors, right? We had Native American neighbors, right? This
Mm,
is an unspoken thing people don't talk about. We had Native American neighbors, the Little John, two different families, Little Johns. It was Native American, indigenous people, right? So we grew up in that neighborhood. We saw everything as normal. My father took us to all of these meetings, and you should know them because your Jegna, I don't like the term mentor, I'm not Greek. I'm going to use the West African term, Jegna, was Dr. Clark. So my father's taking us to all these meetings as little kids. We're going to First World Alliance up in Harlem, right?
City College.
Yes, we're going to City College with Dr. Jeffries and Professor Smalls and Sister Camille Yarborough and their meetings, right? Their programs that they're having. We're going to Kwanzaa's, right? In Brooklyn. We're going to later on after First World Alliance, was created. We had United African Movement, which was very political,
Mhm.
right? But every Wednesday night, they brought somebody to educate. I mean, the top tier African minds in the world, whether they were born in the United States, the Caribbean, the continent, or Europe, they were coming there to teach us. Because you can't have a revolution of political power without the people having the mindset, right? So its founder, my dad became a member, founding member actually of the United African Movement, and a lot of his activism was through that lens, right? A lot of his thinking and politics. And I know people are going to wince at this, but listen, we have a socialist mayor, right? I've had my friend Kristen Richardson Jordan was a socialist council person. It's New York City Council, right? Socialism is not evil, it's not a bad thing. America has many ideals, Social Security, SNAP, WIC. These programs are socialism. The roads, all of this is socialism, right? But you don't understand it because you haven't studied it. So he would take us to Revolutionary Communist Party meetings. Like, these are the things. So he made us in a rich environment. All while my mother was at home, making sure we're eating right. My grandmother's there, making sure, we come from school, doing our homework. My mother had a part-time job. So we grew up in that rich environment, and we didn't have a lot. Like, sometimes people today, and this is one of my, I would say, dislikes, right? Our people today in the United States, wherever we come from, we behave like we not from the root, that we didn't start at the ground, right? I'm going to be honest. My father was a teacher. My mother had a little part-time job. Who knows what she was making at that time? $3 an hour. Who knows, right? Yeah. So we didn't grow up rich, but we always had food on the table. We always had each other. My parents would host people all the time. He had friends from Africa that would come see us, and we would go see them. I remember Nick and Stella. Nick was from, I think, Zimbabwe or Mozambique. So, he's revolutionary. Yeah. Right. And his wife, I think she was from Zimbabwe, Stella. We had them. He had Mr. Maurice Jones that he started teaching with at Harlem Prep, right? Mr. Maurice Jones and his wife, Marjorie. So we always had that. And community, right? Do you have any sugar? Do you have flour? That's how the neighborhood was, right? You take care of each other's children. So in essence, that's Africa.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. That's how African people. So it disappoints me that today we live in these little apartments, or even if you have the money, you live in a big house, and you act like you didn't come from that. You act like that is foreign to American African or African American culture. It is not.
And that's why there's so much that needs to be looked into of why community, the society has become what it is.
Yeah. So and it's not just us suffering from this. I think the general society.
General society, because it has become so materialistic. It has become a place where everybody just, individualistic life.
Individualistic.
And also because of this social media, the new generation of the system, whereby, I don't even need to intermingle, even go out and talk to people. All I need to do is to stay in my corner and then function on my own. I'm fine. So that brought me to Life on 125th Street and education. Your father, you and your late father, who has now joined the
ancestors, yes,
were powerful presence on 125th Street, Harlem, selling books, DVDs, CDs, historical material that shared the political consciousness of countless of New Yorkers, including myself, because I wouldn't even have known many things if it wasn't because of those booksellers.
Yes.
And their work contributed to generation of people who learned Black history outside traditional classroom, on the street corner, in the bookstore, in the lecture hall, like we said, with scholars like Dr. Henry Clark and so many of them. Because I remember at that time, when I go to 125th Street, or they having, during the Kwanzaa, during Black History Month, you see many different authors. We buy CDs, even before CDs, it used to be tapes.
The tapes, I remember.
And then they write neatly on it that this is the lecture of so person. And I still have the DVD, not even DVD, videotapes.
Yes.
Dr. Henry Clark.
VHS.
The VHS, the great mighty work.
Yes.
That he focused on the history of the whole world.
African history.
That's where the history was. So for that nearly 20 years, you and your father held this powerful educational presence. Can you describe that experience to the listener who may never have witnessed that era?
So let me give. So I'm going to start with a quote from your Jegna. A people's history is like a clock, and this clock tells you what time of the day it is, right? So it gives you direction, where to be, when to be, how to be. Because if it's in the morning, we eat breakfast. And it's afternoon, we eat lunch. In the evening, we eat dinner. Late evening, we go to bed. And I'm elaborating on the powerful Dr. Clark lecture quote, but that quote is from Dr. John Henrik Clark, a Georgia boy, from Alabama actually. And when I think of Harlem, I think of Dr. Clark. I think of Dr. Ben. I think of Pork Chop Davis. I think of Malcolm X. I think of Dr. George Simmons. I think of Baba Robert Harris, his teacher, Carlos Cooks. I think of Queen Mother Moore.
Yeah.
Think of Hale House, Mother Hale.
Yes.
I think of Baba Professor Smalls. I think of
Yes.
Dr. Leonard Jeffries. I think of Queen Mother Camille Yarborough. Those are the people I think of when I think of Harlem, right? And I'll give you the background of the Harlem story, right? Like I told you, 74, my dad comes back, 74, 75, my dad comes back to the United States. He starts teaching Harlem Prep. And that's where he met all of these characters. He's a Southern boy. The last time he was in New York was in the early 60s. And coming to New York from the late 50s, he had those touch points, right? In the 50s, sometime in the 50s, Dr. Clark was living in Ghana, you know? So that's our cultural touch point. And you know what's crazy? Maybe I'll do a documentary about this. A lot of people don't know the racial tension that existed in New York City in the 1980s. Mayor Koch was a very, very difficult mayor for Black people. Let me say that. And the policies, just like his antecedent, Rudolph Giuliani, they instituted many racist policies that affected the Black community negatively, no matter whether they were from Africa, South, born and raised in New York, or from the Caribbean. It affected us negatively, just like many policies today. This G theft thing is a big issue, especially in Brooklyn and Queens, places dear to my heart. And so I'm saying that to say that, New York City wasn't what it is today, and people have to understand that. So this is where this activism, this is where we have United African Movement coming into being. Many people don't know New York had very strong chapters of the Black Panther Party in the 70s, in the 60s. So the Black Liberation Army was stationed in New York. Like, there's a lot of things that people haven't connected the dots historically or politically to understand New York City from a Black perspective. So that tension created conflict. We had demonstrations. We didn't have social media, so it didn't blow up globally like, George Floyd did, or Eric Garner, or some of the cases that have come in the last 10, 15 years of police brutality. So, we had many incidents in the East where police overstepped their bounds, killed Black men, shot Black men, arrested Black men for no reason. As one of the most famous cases, which has become worldwide now, is the Central Park Five, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to call them the exonerated five. And that's, those are the things, United African Movement would address, and other movement. I want to give we got to mention December 12th movement that came out of that time in the 80s. CEMOTAP, the Committee to Eliminate Media Offense of the African People, which I'm still a member of today. Those grassroots organizations came out of that struggle and strife with white dumb supremacy. That's what I call white supremacy, white dumb supremacy, right? For you to be the last born child to believe that you're the best is insanity. You should learn from your elder brothers and sisters. You should learn from them. Don't compete with them. But so under that pressure, that's where my dad, I think started writing more, started going to demonstrations. And I remember I'd be like, Daddy, I want to go. He's like, you're a little boy. You're not going to die out there because these police are very racist. So let me get back to the Harlem point, because I'm giving context, because I'm a contextual type of person. I'm a holistic thinker and a holistic doer, right? So that's the way why I'm giving these background, right? So Harlem, right? I remember, I'm sure you remember the GBE, Global Black Experience, or we're going to call it the Gary Bird Experience, right? Our brother that used to be on WLIB and WBLS. from Buffalo, excellent brother, right? And DJ on radio since he was 16 years old in Buffalo, went to the big city to New York. He had this dynamic program, right? And his program was the GBE. And not only was it on radio, but the Sutton family owned NS Communication, right? That owned LIB and BLS at that time. But they also owned the Apollo Theater. So I don't know, whoever came up with this idea was brilliant. That they were going to broadcast live with an audience, that if anybody wanted to come live at the Apollo Theater, halftime dialogue, 12 noon, all of these different slots, right? We had Mark Riley. I remember Kane used to come on after and had his program open to the public right then and there. And it was amazing. So that's when my dad was getting more serious about his writing, and not writings in science, but his writings about his people. So in 1985, he wrote an article that was published in the Daily Challenge, the Black American. These were local papers, daily papers that we had in the city at that time, right?
Amsterdam News.
Amsterdam News. He wrote this one article talking about the Statue of Liberty and its African roots, right? Being based on an African woman and being given as a gift from France to the United States to celebrate not immigrants, not white supremacy, but to celebrate the American resolve, which was a collective resolve to end slavery. So the original statue was a Black woman. The original statue was fashioned after a Black woman. This is why to this day, the chains on the feet are there. People don't understand it, right? That's why. But as the plan went along in the 1870s and 1880s, and attitudes towards race changed in America, Reconstruction ended. And the rise of white supremacy came again through the lens of the Ku Klux Klan and later on citizens' councils that blocked Black people from voting. America didn't want a Black woman standing in, New York Harbor. So they changed it to a white woman. Still with the 7 spires, still holding the tablets of 4th of July, still with the chains on her feet, right? And I remember I must have been like 8, 9 years old when my dad was doing all the research for this. He turned his scientific investigative skills into researcher, as a historian and political scientist skills. And we went to the Museum of the History of the City of New York, still operating today. And we heard that there had been a replica that was there from the original time in the 1870s that the New York Museum had. The New York Historical Society, excuse me, and asked all the curators, all of this. Nobody knew anything. This Haitian security guard said, "Come, you and your sons, I'm going to show you where it is." He took us right to it. I remember clear as day, it was a Black woman, her hands raised to liberation. That was the original model. Wow, this is amazing, right? So why I'm telling that way is because that's got my dad becoming a writer, right? And Dr. Jeffries took that article. Dr. Jeffries blew that up, right? And we were already in and out of Harlem all the time, coming from Queens. But then my dad wrote a book from the Statue of Liberty to the Statue of Bigotry, and talking about race in America, talking about, history that I just explained about the Statue of Liberty and America's changing attitudes towards race at that time. And, so he started selling that book, in the P's. He didn't go to no publisher. He took his New York teacher salary at that time, and he put his money where his mouth was, published the book, and started selling them for like $10. And he would be selling them outside of the Apollo. So that's why I had to tell the story that way. As he's selling that book there, so he would be going in and out. He'd leave me and my little brother there. After the program would end, we would sit with a little TV table, a dinner table, right? That's what they used to call it, a TV table. And we'd have his little book there and selling it. And then people started asking us for other books. You have Miseducation of the Negro. Do you have this? Now, since my dad was already selling his books to the distributors at the time, D&J Books in Queens, A&B, the famous A&B books in Brooklyn. What was the other one? We had another one downtown. There's so many serious Black book dealers at the time. So he started, what he would do was sometimes he would either just buy wholesale books and we started selling them right there on the TV table. Or he would trade his books for those books, right? Wholesale trade, right? So that's how we started selling. That was not his intent. But as usually the mother of invention is necessity, right? And that's how we started, and it started just growing. We had a TV table. Then I was a little boy, maybe I was like less than 10, 8, 9. Then we had a larger table, maybe like one of the square card tables. Then we got a 6-foot table, right? So then we started doing Kwanzaa, selling books. Then we started doing different events. Going to African Arts Festival in Brooklyn, which we
Yeah.
was raised in anyway. So we started doing all of these events, and then my dad on the weekends would sell, have us selling books at later on in the 90s at National Action Network, which spun out of UAM. That's Reverend Al Sharpton's organization. But National Action Network started as a very Black nationalistic Pan-African organization coming out of United African Movement founded by Attorney Althematic. They were partners. Sharpton and Althematics were partners. So he spun off on his own. So we would sell books there. We would sell books on Wednesday night. UAM, I'm getting home. Junior high, we're staying out till midnight, 1 a.m. But we're having fun. We're learning. We're in the lectures. The tables outside. And that was a whole, outside of Harlem was one thing. Brooklyn was a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
That was a whole movement on Wednesday nights. It's like you took Harlem and you brought it right into the center of Bed-Stuy, right? You got, I remember Prince Yahya and his mother doing, it's the first person I seen doing a smoothie. It's in the 80s. I'm like, what is going on? Like, what is that, a smoothie? I'm eating McDonald's at that time in New York. So that really shaped me as well. But it also taught me like hard work because my father would be paying us. So I was a little boy. I always had money. I remember when I got in high school, my female friend, women are always watching their pockets, I guess, right? She was like, you always got money. I was like, huh? I didn't understand it because I'm like, oh, I work for my dad. So he pays it. Every time we go to work, he pays us. We make money, he just pays us. He pays me and my brother. So I didn't think nothing of it. And I didn't understand the impact. So our experience in Harlem was not just Harlem, it was Brooklyn. It was at that time selling, because my dad is still working full time at that time, writing his articles for the Daily Challenge and later on the Amsterdam News. And he publishing these small pamphlets and books. The book that really put on the map was the HIV and AIDS book, as Beyon Walker. That's a whole nother discussion. But that bonded us. But when you really came into contact, because you're talking about now, do you remember Brother Big Man? I used to be on the corner of 7th Avenue and 125th, where today is Marshall's. It used to be right there. Then you had up the block, you had, he just passed as well a few years ago, Say Cool. Brother Say Cool in his burgundy van of books, and then later on DVDs. So now we're getting like late 80s, 90s, and we come into the 2000s. So now
in the Bronx, they had bookstores right there on 161, right in front of where they now have the mall.
Wow. Yeah, I know exactly where that is.
Yeah.
That's near Yankee Stadium.
Yeah. Right across from Criminal Court, they have.
Okay. Yeah. I know exactly where that is.
There's a brother that used to, and he has so many books there. So during lunchtime, being that I worked on 161st,
you would just go there, boom.
I would just go there and see what is new. He knows who has what. He said, when you even pass him, if you don't have the time to talk to him, say, have you seen this book? This is a new one that just came out. Mostly from the DVDs and all that stuff. And I think I must have told you the story before when in my first job working with, when you mentioned HIV/AIDS, working with in Division of AIDS Services, there's African American man sitting right behind me. I didn't even know too much about all this. You open my eyes, because when you go to school, when you in college, you might take Black studies, but what you take in college is completely different. What you learn from the street. So you play, he has the radio on all the time. And I used to listen WLIB. And many lectures comes. I said, what's that?
Yes.
Then that's
it was a powerhouse.
Yeah, that was when it was giving me all this knowledge about
writing on your mind.
On my mind. They told me so many of this lecture at City College. I learned about many of the elders that you mentioned, Dr. Henry Clark, Dr. Jeffrey, about the history, what they actually put in their own books is different from what you see in college,
Yes,
so
very
if
different.
I wasn't lucky enough to see that, I wouldn't have those knowledge background that I had.
The time shaped you. The time and you being able to speak to those individuals, come in
Yeah.
contact, that made it real. So
Yeah.
that's why, like, I'm glad you asked me the question about Harlem, and I kind of had to expand it because it was bigger than Harlem. And I'm glad
Yeah.
you
It
gave
was
me
bigger.
the
Yeah.
Bronx experience too. It's real,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
New York is a hub, still in many ways is a hub of Black information, right? Like, and that's what I was coming up to the 2000s. My dad retired. His plan was to go back because by that time I was in college. I'm a graduate of Medgar Evers College, so I was in college, and my brother was at Queensborough College. So we kind of, you grown. So now, pops, you on your own. We learning about the world too in our own way. But when my pops retired, I was in my early 20s, and I was about to graduate. And I was like, I said, pops, you want me to come start helping you? It's about 2001. I said, you want me to help you in Harlem? He said, yeah, come on, son. So I would go with him, and start helping him sell books again, and all of the things that we were already doing back in the 80s and early 90s. And we met brothers there. Like we had a brother, he's still active today, brother Sa Netta, that used to sell the tapes. He was a new Black Panther under Khalid Muhammad, and he became a entrepreneur from that thing with the tapes. And he was there, and we were right next to him. And brother Big Man was still there down the block at that time. Brother Sekou and Big Man and Sekou, God rest it, down there. Our ancestors now too. They were down the block between Lenox and Adam Clayton Powell. We were between Adam Clayton Powell and Frederick Douglass. That's 7th and 8th Avenue. That's where we were. And, we were on the north side of the street, right in front of the historic Mart 125, and across the street from the historic Apollo Theater. So it was like me and my dad's journey went full circle. We started at the Apollo and we came back to the Apollo in essence, right? Like, we couldn't have written the script, right, to how things were going to play out, right? So my dad, like I said, he wanted to do that to keep active, but keep with his people, right? He was still a strong man in his early 60s at that time. And he wanted to go to Africa and found a Pan-African educational center for his people, one in Ghana and one in Nairobi. He was going to go to Nairobi and do it. And his friend, Dr. Shaka Musa Barshango, who was like his brother, really, in many ways, right? And he was going to head up the Accra side of things. But old men get old.
Yeah.
I would become serious, and I think in 2002, no, 2004, January, his good friend Dr. Shaka Musa Barshango, and people know him as a Black minister, but more readily know him because of the work he did on exposing the lies and contradictions of European holidays, especially for the African American. And that was people know my dad for that too. That's how they became bonded as brothers. So then we started all of that, and Sa Netta is a rabble rouser. Brother Sa Netta he starts putting up these pictures of the lynching, and we got the books, he got the tapes, and so it started like that synergy that is Harlem. I always felt that spot, which I still vend at sometimes. I just stopped a few months ago because of family obligations and things like that. But, still every weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, sometimes Thursday, Friday, Sunday, still
You,
doing African Arts Festival, still doing Kwanzaa. Still, I'm doing the same things that my dad taught me to do and we did together in many ways today, outside of, adding my activism and all of those different things. But that spot, I always felt like something spiritual that we can't explain through human language, right? Maybe we can feel it more. So I always felt that like the spirit of ancestors, Dr. King, Malcolm X, all the greats is in that area. And they're not haunting us, they're spurring us on to be great. I would always feel that energy. My father would say, we would get in the car and start driving, we'll go over to Triborough. We wanted to be cheap on that day. We would take to Queensborough, no toll at that time, right? And he said, he would look over at me, he'd be like, man, he said, you come alive when you start. He said, when we start the journey to Harlem, you come alive. Now, as Nana Asare, I understand the spiritual connection now as being more spiritually mature and learned in those areas than I was at that time. That was the draw. That's the energy. He's always with you. So we got to influence people without trying to create propaganda, without crafting a narrative, which
It's
is pure
education.
truth, pure truth, pure
Education.
truth through
But
our debates, our speaking, everything.
yeah, so I want to ask you, what do you think was lost or gained as this type of street level intellectual cultural faded from today's
Oh,
community
that's a
lives?
beautiful question. Wow, that's a beautiful question. So I think what has been lost, we'll start there, is that the everyday person, even though they might be on social media, it's a different medium when you interact with another human being face to face. So at that time, we had no choice but to be face to face. 80s, 90s, early 2000s, before the advent of YouTube, social media, and all of these things. And having a book or VHS or DVD later on. But I think that touch point has been lost. That energy that is still generated. You see, we watch concerts all the time or go to concerts, whether they're Broadway shows or R&B, Afrobeat, hip hop, classical. When people are together, there's an energy that is created. When people were at UAM, when people were at National Action Network, when people were at First World, it was an energy, a brain trust, a power that was being created, right? Just like to this day, we outside of going to concerts and things, when we demonstrate and against things that we don't agree with. We got No Kings now, right? The No Kings protest. That's energy. And that energy is a very powerful thing. And it can shape, hearts and minds of people, right? Especially when you're there and experiencing those things. So I think less and less people being physically available, less and less lectures happening. And even remember, all of these lectures, some people that are not familiar with those terms might think that these were paid lectures because we were listening to PhD level.
Yeah,
People.
college. I remember at that time in the 80s, I paid $6.
That was nothing. The vast majority of them were free. Even at that time, $5, $6, nothing. Like today, you go to, even if you get it, if somebody's brave enough to do a conscious lecture, right? It's, 30, 40, $50. That means there's a difference in the psychology of how people are operating, which is fine. I'm an entrepreneur. I understand business and those things, but the accessibility I remember literally meeting Dr. Clark for the first time consciously. I was little, maybe 7, right on 125th Street, near the corner of Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard. I met Dr. Clark right there, right? We got Pork Chop Davis was a street speaker. These people, so Malcolm X was a street speaker right there. So can you imagine, like I'm born in the mid-70s. So I can't even imagine what it would be to be looking up as a little boy, the influence that would have on my mind that be hearing people that's telling you the truth and history and telling you when everything is telling you you're nobody and you're nothing, right? That this man is brave enough to stand on a step ladder and speak truth to power in the face of white supremacy, to shatter all the mythology, to shatter all the lies. That's a powerful thing that we've lost. This is a great conversation. We're here on Zoom, right? This is the medium that we have chosen to speak through and to send this message to the world. But think about it. We're in the same room together. I'm there in your office boom. The energy would be different. The energy is good like this and building like this. When two humans are together, right? And then more and more come. It's a powerful thing. So to lose that in some ways because of technology and because of something that we haven't spoken about, the war on the Black mind, let's call it that, right? The war on true Black liberation and education, right, hasn't stopped. It's just transformed, just like the mediums have transformed. But I just think, that we have to, as a people, we have to get back to some of those things. And everything cannot be about, the bottom line cannot be the American dollar, especially when our labor, slave labor is the basis of the American dollar. And people used to buy us. We have to evolve or, and look back at cultural and historical touch points that us as African people didn't value those things, material in that way. We value the spirit of people, of the planet, and we lived in respect, just like all indigenous people do and did. Now, let me answer it on the other side. Yes, there are benefits, right? This conversation now can go out to millions of people with a click of a button, right? This conversation can be shared widely via all the social media and different things that we have available to us today. So that is a benefit to the new age that we have. Also, being able to communicate, right, through WhatsApp with our people on the continent in Europe. I got friends all over the world. I mean, it's amazing, but the technology lets it be that way. You know, being able to travel much easier now, especially to the continent. You know, like we didn't have all of these flights and things like, and I'll bring that to 1982 was the first time my parents took us to the continent. And that was a journey because we're flying to Nigeria, we're flying to Cameroon, then we're flying to over to Kenya. You know, it was, and we were little boys, 3 and 4 years old, me and my brother, Razor. And it was just a beautiful experience. But these are these type of conversations that you are conducting through your life work. I think this is, part of what we have to do and tell our stories and, write our books and write our plays. Sometimes we do get caught up in the propaganda and we get upset at the different things that are being presented to us from pop culture. But the only way you combat that is to create your own. So I think there's positives that came out of this new technology that we've in the ending of certain things, but we still can't remember where we came from. But where we came from is telling us where we're going. We can't really stop that. And I just think that we as a people have to be more focused and we have to educate ourselves more and take different stances than we have taken and recognize our wins. And we are not losers. We're the absolute winners of the genetic lottery, of the spiritual lottery. And even in this country, we've done some tremendous things, tremendous. And, we can't forget where we came from. We cannot turn our backs on our ancestors. I saw a shirt a few years ago and it said, I am not my ancestors.
Wow.
And I understand, my American African people and African American people, but you have to be careful with your words.
Your ancestor fought for you.
You are your ancestors. Forget all of that. You are your ancestors. I'm not talking about spookism. I'm talking about physically in your genetic code. So grandmother, grandfather, mother, father, all those people, the thousands of people that existed to create you, you are them in the modern form. You, Sister Sariki, me, Brother Nana Asare. That's who we are. So for you to say that without saying it, you saying it because you're like, I'm not going to take SHIT from anybody. I get that. And you have to understand your ancestors that took all that negative beat down behavior did that so you could exist. That's why they did it. Now you here and you can talk. Before, in the South, before we had a laugh or something, we had to put our head in laughing barrels. We couldn't even, don't glance at no white woman. We know what will happen. So you have to understand, like, we have to put things in better context as a family. Yeah. So
and that brought me to your childhood in New York City, then versus now. New York City can shape a young person in a profound way.
Very profound.
Your upbringing was very different.
Very, it was.
From the ones of today, of what they face. So comparing your teenage years to today's youth, what do you see as the key differences, particularly with issue of gang violence, lack of community engagement, and weak in leadership?
So I became a teenager in 1990. If we remember New York, 1990, New York was hip hop. So in hip hop was Black people. I don't think hip hop today is Black people. That's a whole nother conversation we can have for 2 hours on that. So outside of my Black consciousness, right, I'm raised in the age when hip hop, the golden age is what they call it, right? The golden age of hip hop. We have Public Enemy. We have Nation of Gods and Earth, Pete brothers like Big Daddy Kane that were adherents to those philosophies. Rakim, the God Allah. We have these people coming and telling the truth in these with these beautiful voices and hardcore, telling the truth about our experiences in the inner city, right? Telling the truth about white supremacy, right? We got Spike Lee making Do the Right Thing. So those are the things as a young person in what was popular culture at that time, because the white power structure didn't know what to do with hip hop at that time. So it was more independent, right? The labels had to deal with, like, that was the vibe. I remember that Fight the Power video. I remember all the videos, we had songs against the crack epidemic. That was the 80s, was insane. And New York was tremendously unsafe in them times. The 80s and early 90s. So in a sense, like I can say it cleanly that most of us from that time that grew up in black and brown communities in New York City grew up in a war zone because you had the drug dealers at war with each other, which is an extension of American capitalism. Let's be very clear. Drugs are not coming to America without the big manipulators of capitalism being involved with it. Guns are not coming into America or being produced in America without the big controllers of the capitalist system being involved in it, right? And we can look at different documentaries and we can watch the show Snowfall, and you're seeing the CIA, Iran, Contra, and all of this thing was interconnected, right? For those of you that would love to do that research, I implore you to do it, right? But it was still a good time to learn and to grow, right? In the hood, we say we keep our head on swivel. That means we're always watching. So as a New Yorker, I got that sense from having to watch my back. Somebody can try to rob you, steal your sneakers, steal your jacket. So it was a very difficult and unsafe time. Even in the 70s, I don't remember too much about the 70s, but I do remember the 70s and 80s, my grandmother would get robbed. She would go to Bible study that she was leading on Wednesday nights, and she would get robbed coming home all the way from Harlem. Her church was located to here in Queens. And so, my childhood, and I remember going to high school. I went to a high school in Queens, Springfield Gardens High School. And when I was in 10th grade in 1992, they instituted, we're one of the first schools that had metal detectors. And we had these little ID cards with our pictures on it. And we had to scan in. If it was green, you get to go in. Right? You had to put your bag, just like TSA. That was every day for 3 years of my high school experience. I had to do a TSA experience to get into school. And many students in New York City are still dealing with that. But, had to put the card in. If it's green, you go in. If it's yellow, they got to pull you to the side. Red, maybe you're suspended. This is the, prison industrial complex, the surveillance state, as we know it today, fully fleshed out in many ways. It's beginning, right? We were the guinea pigs, shall I say, right? It definitely, was a unique experience, a difficult experience, but I wouldn't trade it for anything because I wouldn't be what I am. And today, I wouldn't be what I am. But to answer your question, the differences that I see, I want to tell everybody here, I have a 13-year-old daughter, right? That's in 8th grade, about to go to high school in 2026. So there are a lot of differences in the time. And I think social media poses challenges, the internet poses different challenges that we could grow up isolated in many ways, right? Innocent in many ways to things in the world, in our community. Today is very difficult for any parent, especially as your children matriculate and become older, to shield them from certain things that you think are dangerous. So I think as a young person, and some people might say it's overexposure, but I think with every age that you have to have a balance and have an eye to the time itself. It's easy for me to say, oh, like a lot of people in my age group in their 40s, I say these young people, this, and that. But I'll never talk like that because some of the greatest advice my dad gave me about being a parent when I became a parent nearly 14 years ago was you have to raise your children in their time. You can't raise your children in your time. So I have to be objective. But one difference that I see is in what disturbs me about today and what's going on. And I'm not saying that my time was better or it made more sense, but the violence that I'm witnessing today is so senseless. There's no reason in a sense, in a physical sense. Let me put it that way, because I am a study of the human mind, right? A neuroscientist, psychologist. That's how my brain works. So I understand there are a lot of reasons why people do what they do in the psychological phenomenon work. But when I was growing up, the violence that we witnessed were crimes of poverty. You being a 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid or young person that didn't have a chance to go to university, right? Parents don't have much, raising the low budget environments that America calls its ghettos, which is really a concentration camp many times, right? You want things because this country capitalism places value on things. And if you don't have money, you don't have things. So being a drug dealer, not that I condone it, but I can understand it. Because if you grew up without values, you grew up with low morality, or you grow up in a society that says Bonnie and Clyde are heroes, that the gangsters are heroes, and they get the girl. All these Italian mobsters and Jewish mobsters and, Irish mobsters are heroes, right? We're growing up. Those are our heroes. How do you expect people to behave if they can't get a job on Wall Street? If they can't get a city job, if they're not educated enough, they don't have the opportunities. So I understand that time and why people were doing what they were doing. So if there was a death or something, it was like territory. This guy was not supposed to be selling there. So, maybe I wasn't rationalizing them at that time. It was traumatic as a child to know these things. But as an adult, I can understand why those things happen. We fast forward to today. We have fought through so many things and won so many battles. A lot of us are college educated. A lot of us have the opportunity to have city jobs. No matter what your walking station in life, if you have the qualifications, it's democratic in a sense, right? There's still, of course, racism and sexism in any system that they exist, right? But we have so much more capable things. So young people, the things that they're doing today, to me, baffles me, right? And you know what? Let me not even say they baffle me. To me, there's no connection with the world of what capitalism wants you to have things and the violence that we see many times is senseless. Oh, he was just shot. It was something online beef. His friend made a song about this and blah, blah, blah. He played it here. Like all of these things that we're hearing and, this 13-year-old, one of my daughters, it wasn't her friend, but it was her friend's friend that was killed on Springfield Boulevard and Linden Boulevard at a Dunkin' Donuts several months ago.
Yes.
How do I rationalize that to a 13-year-old? Like, and there's no sense. There's no real reason for that to happen, right? Because today we have access to far more than we had access to even than when I was a teenager 30 plus years ago. So but I do understand it, and I'll flex my muscle in terms of being a psychological thinker and a graduate of that field of study. In our community, I'm going to say it's straight up related to our trauma. Even the violence back then that I grew up seeing in the 80s and 90s, and much of the violence that we can look at in our intra-community, right, are tied to even the domestic violence in our community, the child molestation, the grooming, and all of these things that are in the media because of people like Diddy and R. Kelly and different things that have come out. These things are linked very differently for us to our trauma than to when we talk about other communities that practice these same things, right? And that could be a whole nother conversation for several hours. Our trauma, we have never dealt with it as a people, right? And what I mean is, we can intellectualize it, talk about it all day. In therapy, right? You have to accept if you're an addict, you have to say I'm an addict, right?
Mm-hmm.
To overcome it. If you're in couples therapy, you each have to acknowledge, right, each other's feelings and emotions and truths, right? And then be real with yourself about it and how do you feel about it and interchange with your therapist. In psychotherapy, you have to come in contact with your childhood and things that shaped you, good, bad, and ugly. So as a people, right, you have to come to grips with what has happened to your ancestors. You can't just ignore it, right? You can't just, sweep it under the rug. You can't just not talk about it because what happens, right? If you ignore something, as if let's say you have a limp and you don't deal with it, or you have a sore or abscess and you don't deal with it, it festers. It gets worse and can even kill you. So when we're looking at these behaviors, I think the unspoken thing in our community is that we're not looking at how intergenerational trauma passed down from enslavement, passed down from sexual exploitation by Europeans, which translates into the grooming culture, which is translated into domestic violence culture, which is translated into rape culture in our community. And there's so many other things that have evolved from those times. But then whether you've been through the colonial experience, sometimes those of us that are born outside of the United States or have roots outside the United States act like colonization was Club Med. It was going to hedonism. Oh, colonization is the enslavement of an entire nation. So it's slavery by any other name, right? So you're going to have traumatic experiences that are passed down to you. We have a time with a lot of debates about We call them the diaspora wars, or they call them, the propaganda machine calls it
Yeah,
the
I'm gonna
diaspora wars. Don't worry, I'm not going to touch it now. But what I'm saying is we are traumatized people, right? And we're not recognizing we're traumatized people. And one thing in psychology that they teach you is hurt. It's a proverb: hurt people hurt people. And usually, who you're going to hurt are the people closest to you. You're not going to go out and seek, people across the country to go hurt. You're going to hurt who's in your house, your neighbors, your coworkers, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, right? Your husband, your wife, right? But yeah, so we can wax poetic about this whole thing, but that's the difference between my young adulthood and what I see today through the eyes and lens of young people I'm around, in particular my daughter, is that there's a deeper thing that we have to get to, right? To uproot that. And I'm glad they're going through that so we can look at it.
Yeah, and I'm so sad. I won't even, understand. I'm glad your daughter has someone like you to help explain
Yeah,
why. Because it's traumatic for somebody of a 14-year-old to be losing
yeah,
a friend.
yeah. It's
I,
very
I
traumatic.
worked at family court and I see some of these young men or young women within family
Hmm.
court, they come into the courthouse, okay,
Hmm.
they reporting because they got arrested or they reporting to their probation officer or they reporting for some other things. And, they have
Uh-huh.
a picture of a friend who has just been killed
Wearing on the shirt or
wear
the button. Yeah,
on their shirt,
yeah.
okay, to
Hmm.
show the picture of that person.
Yeah.
And when you talk to them, it is so sad that
Very sad.
many of these young people with then the projection of how long they're going to live themselves, thinking, I'm not going to live up to 21-year-old because
Oh
this
my.
is what they constantly see
Yeah.
within their neighborhood, within their
Yeah.
community. And
Hmm.
we understand the experience of slave
Hmm.
colonization. We understand the
Hmm.
segregation, the
Yeah.
brutality
Yeah.
that
Thank
was
you for
done.
bringing up segregation.
But when are we going to then take initiative as
Yes,
community
that's
to
what I'm
say,
talking about.
what? We need to take control.
Yes.
We understand all those things, but we need to take control. Because when you look, there's so many other African Americans who went through the same thing
Yes.
on the other side. I just actually finished reading the book of Ketanji Brown Jackson,
Nice. Mhm.
okay, because I was so moved by her story. From our grandfather, from the mother's side, who was a driver of that was during the segregation, white man, white couple, whereby when he drives them to event, he has to stay outside. He
Yeah.
has to use different bathroom.
Yes.
But look at where Ketanji is today.
Hmm.
And I will wish many people, because those are the people that I looked at and I said, even though they went through all this, look where they are today.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
Well, that's why I said we are winners. You didn't hear it before.
yeah.
We are literally winners, and we keep fighting the same fights over and over because the disconnect, in my opinion, is the disconnect of our past to our present. We're
Mhm.
trying to assimilate into white America, right? But without contending with where we came from in white America. You
Yeah.
have to deal with it and face it in a way if we are to liberate ourselves. The liberation, we don't have any more physical change, right? So the liberation is the liberation of your brain. Notice I didn't say mind because your brain, the mind is a creation of the brain. And you have neural pathways. You can't ignore those things. So we have these neural pathways and trauma bonds. And then we have to admit we have a trauma bond with white America. We have a tremendous, and white America has a trauma bond with us. We have a trauma, wherever you've been colonized, there's a trauma, some type of trauma bond between you and the oppressor. And
Yeah.
one book that I think will help people mention it is The Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, a Brazilian. I'm gonna call him a philosopher. He's a psychologist and educator, but in a way, it's so philosophical in the way he's approaching education that we have to understand that relationship. And I think once we start dealing with that as a collective and study people like Dr. Amos Wilson and even Marcus Garvey 100 years ago, and the plans and Booker T. Washington, who was one of my favorites, understudied and underappreciated African American scholars and doers that created Tuskegee Institute, which evolved into Tuskegee University. which one of my big cousins graduated from. You know, like those people gave us blueprints. It just looked like, let me bring this into the conversation. It's like what's going on in the Sahel states of West Africa, right? We have Mali, we have Niger, and we have Burkina Faso, led by three military men, right? That's what I told you. Earlier, I said I'm holistic. So I love what our people have accomplished as individuals, right? But I am of the philosophy that if one of us is enslaved, it might as well be all of us. If one of us is locked in the Supermax prison in New York State or the Supermax prison in Colorado, whatever, right? That's us. So we have to look at one of the things that we have to begin to develop, especially as a global African village, is that mindset. And I was bringing up the Sahel states. See, people, if they're not steeped in political history or what we call political science or general history, and they haven't studied medieval, what Europeans call medieval, West African history, and they haven't studied African revolutionary history in the 20th century, they don't understand what's happening in the Sahel states. You see, President Traore is the natural grandchild or child of Thomas Sankara, right? Just like in Ghana, John Jerry Rawlings is the natural nephew of Kwame Nkrumah. Like, there's an evolution continuing. Then, if we go to medieval West Africa, we have to talk about the Songhai, the Mali, and the Ghana empires. Today, what we are literally witnessing in the Sahel states coming into and leaving ECOWAS, not being invited to the African Union, what we're witnessing is the rise of the Malian, the Songhai, and the Ghanaian Empire 2.0. Those countries are those countries. But people, because they don't have the connecting dots, as Dr. Clark told us we have to get, they don't understand that. So how can the people that come from that legacy, that rich legacy of producing the 90% of the gold market in the world several hundred years ago, and Mansa Musa, King Musa being the richest man in the world ever, the salt trade, right? The idea, the University of Timbuktu, Shanghai, all these places that educating people, you have to put it together to say, this is a natural phenomenon that you cannot, they say you can't keep a good man down. And another proverb is, the cream always rises to the top. So the stances they're taking against the French, right, and creating their own, they're getting rid of the CFA franc, right? Now they have an $895 billion bank that they just created a few weeks ago, that they just launched. And that's a natural phenomenon. That is a global African revolution. Whether we understand that or not, sitting here in these United States, that's what you're witnessing. That's the rise of the empires that many of us that are here and ancestors were enslaved in the West, that's where we came from.
Which is I do understand, because we have to connect with the past in order to move to the future. That is very important.
You have to reconcile a lot of things. Look at how the recognized Jewish community today to a culture that is not of their creation. Oh, let's think about it. Let's think about it. No, let's think about it, right? They cling to a culture that is not their creation. But let's add this. The Holocaust was not a hoax, right? Millions of Jews were abused, killed, maimed, property stolen, right? That has had a profound impact on their psychology. We can't deny that.
And of course, we can't deny that. And you know what? They never forget that. And they move along and say, you know what?
As a unit,
we're going to do what we have to do to...
Jews from Germany, Jews from Austria, Jews from France, Jews from UK, from everywhere.
They connect as one. So it's all part of, and I want to bring, and also to understand, okay, what are the flaws within their community and what they have to...
They address it.
They address it, but we are not addressing, which brings me to We have to. It brings me to public school education.
Yes.
The past, the present, and the responsibility, which is part of what we're almost talking about. You are proudly a product of New York City public school system. Today,
yes, I am. All the way to college.
Today,
the bachelor's degree. Yes.
The system faces serious challenges, including excessive absenteeism. You're talking about low grade reading level. You're talking about high dropout rate. How would you describe the public school system of what is going through now with the current crisis? With, like I said, low literacy, low engagement. Who would you think bear the responsibility? The parents, the school, or the wider community, or the system?
So I'm gonna
Related
say all
to the
four.
race. All four. Okay.
At all four, and I'm gonna add five. The older students too are responsible.
Okay.
Because you get to a point in your development, you're responsible for yourself. Okay. We can't. There's a reason why in New York City you can drop out at 16. It's your choice. So, but I'm gonna. That is a very, like, once again, this is a topic that we can talk about for 2 hours too, right? So I'm getting my succinct thoughts together because I want to say something that makes more than absolute sense. So there's an article. I haven't read it because I'm behind a paywall. So article, let me look it up real quick. It's from the New York Magazine, right? Let me look it. I'm gonna give you the author's name right now. But and anyway, I don't want to waste time. I'll find it before the end of the call, and I'll remind the audience to go look it up. New York Magazine article, and I saw it because I was watching MSNBC, and they had the author of the article. The title of the article is "Education is Crumbling. It wasn't Trump or the pandemic." Now, I'll give you the author so you can look it up. On harvard.edu, there's a small blurb of it. You can read one paragraph, but it's written by Andrew Rice. And you can also look up a video. I think the MSNBC video, and he's been doing the rounds on the television shows, because what he did was a critical analysis of American education. And what I think he's facing, and I haven't read the article, so I can't, from his talking points, I don't know if it should have been, there has to be some analysis of how technology has impacted us as educators and as students, right? We learn in a very, and each individual learns their own way, but I think having access to information in the 21st century is a very different thing. I just was reading an article the other day that said the information we come into contact with in one day compared to our ancestors from 100 years ago, it's for them to get that much stimulation would take 1 month. So let's think about that. So within 12 days, you've been exposed to so much information. If we took your ancestor from 100 years ago, it would take them 1 year, what we're exposed to in 12 days. So when you look at that, you're like, that's deep. But this presenter, this author, he brought up why his idea, Andrew Rice is his name, why is America struggling? America used to be a top 5 country in all of these categories: science, engineering, right? High literacy rates, right? So you beg the question, student achievement has fallen off. Why? What's going on? And he's connecting it to certain things, like the technology, I would say, it has an impact on how we process information. I would say discipline in the home. But he was really getting at the system. And he was saying that the public education's focus has shifted in many ways, right? Remember, we had George Bush and the Lone Child Left Behind, and they started talking about, we're not going to learn phonics. We're going to go to this sight word thing. That really impacted how education was meted out. Then another thing that he brings up is the school itself and school administrators have become more, I don't want to say, they have become more like social workers in so many ways. So the focus of the school building is not education anymore because of poverty, because of psychological challenges, because that I think are being created by rugged individualism of capitalism, right? That's in my opinion. These things are being created by this hyper materialistic environment that we are exposed to. And he's like, America's fallen off the map on all these categories. As he said, it's not Trump. Don't blame the pandemic. These things have been going on before there was a Donald Trump as president. And not that we're any friend of him, but we have to be honest, right? If we're going to solve problems, at least internally, we have to be honest. And it wasn't the pandemic. Oh, learning loss. So now if a school has a budget of, because we're spending more money on education than ever. And that was one of Andrew Rice's arguments. He said, these rural states that are piss poor in education when you compare it to, the Northeast, Chicago, Los Angeles, Seattle. These are rich states that spend tremendous amounts of money in education, right? He gave an example. I forgot which state it was, but it was one of the Alabama, Mississippi, one of those states, one of the poorer southern states. And he said their education is on par with Massachusetts. Massachusetts spends one of the highest dollars per student in the United States of America. He said, so how was that? What happened is those poor states don't have the money to hire all of these fancy named people, or they're not doing social work. They have a social work department doing that. There's so much needs, and the needs are there. I agree, right? But when you have to hire, a mental health counselor, a guidance counselor, and all of these people, that eats away at your budget. Now we're not talking about, when I went to school, it was the 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, right? There wasn't all of these other things going. There were not all of these distractions. Sometimes even I feel like even the after school program that I send my daughter to in many ways is a distraction, right? You got STEP, you got this, you got that. They're playing, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, why is your homework not done? Like, if I'm going to send you to after school for 2.5 hours, right? 3 hours nearly, why is your homework not finished? That's not on the student themselves. That's because of the way the after school is structured, right?
But
Yeah.
let me just come in there.
Yeah, of course.
Even though we have the school is for learning, they might have social worker, mental health workers in the school because there's so much that many of these kids come from. Okay, we talked about domestic violence. We talk about
everything
that many of these children actually experience, which create trauma in their life.
Yes, and why they're acting out in school.
And they come to school, they cannot
function.
Some didn't even have breakfast before leaving,
food.
Or no food. When I was working in family court,
you saw it all. I
saw it all. When a child will come to my office, because one thing I usually used to do before I retire from the job now, I have snacks on my table.
They would eat them all up.
Yeah, and I give them. Some of my fruits that I brought for myself, they said, some of them would say, Miss, I never saw fruit so fresh like this. Where did you get this from?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we have to really talk about things. We have to actually talk about ourselves as parents. And I understand there's so many single parents.
Moving parts. There's so much thing. Yeah.
Whereby maybe it's only one single parents who have to work 2-3 jobs. But then you have other people whereby their focus on priorities completely different, whereby it's not focusing on those children. When a child wake up in the morning, the first thing is for you to get up,
take care of them before you take care of you.
Yeah. Take care of all those things. Then you go to school. I expect to be in school for you to function.
Yes.
So we have to look at our own community. What is it that
of course, 100%. Because the only reason I brought up the broader topic, because I know it's affecting us in a different way too. We can't just sit here and absolve ourselves as responsibilities because we're in a flawed system.
Yeah.
It's your job to not just analyze the flawed system, but to adjust to it and change it if it gets so bad. I mean, and I'm not going to brag and boast that I'm some, guru parent, right? We all as parents, as we evolve through the different stages of parenting, because now you're a parent of adult. That's a whole different thing I can imagine, right? Yeah. So I had to, let me tell you, so there was things I did not like that were going on during COVID and when school restarted. I reached out to the school in August of that year when my daughter was going to 4th grade. She did all of 3rd grade, half of 2nd grade during the pandemic, all of 3rd grade online. So now the schools are opening up back when she was in 4th grade, right? So I reached out to the school, for certain things. I was like, I'm uncomfortable I don't want my child wearing a mask for 6-7 hours a day. That to me, that was illogical, right? For my scientific understanding about health and all of these things. You wearing a mask while you're in the bus or the train, that's fine. That's commute. But now you got to, no, I didn't like that. And it wasn't out of fear. It was out of great and concern for that time. And so I asked the school what were my options and so on and so forth. Let me tell you, they were not helpful, right? So what I wound up having to do, I homeschooled my daughter for 2 years. In fifth grade, I homeschooled her. Was it easy? Hell no. To craft a lesson, right? I'm not that type of educator, right? I was instructor, in university at times, right? I've done that job. I don't have to craft a lesson plan, right? I know what to do. Like college is a different animal, but with children, you have to put things together in a certain way so that they learn. DOE, no disrespect to them. I think they're a beautiful institution, and I think they're a far better institution than when I was coming up. And I stand by public education as opposed to charter schools, right? I stand by them. I think they're absolutely necessary for our community. But when a parent comes to you with a concern, as a system that has a billion, their budget is like a country budget when you look at it, right? And you don't communicate, and then you call ACS on that parent that is homeschooling their child, that is trying to work with you, right? So there's so many things we're contending with, right? But my point being is you have to take the responsibility, right, of a failed system at times into your own hands. You can't be afraid of it. You listen right now, listen. My 20-month-old son is here in the background. I'm letting him cut up, and I got so much to clean when we get off this call. I left him with his food, and right, because I knew we were going to be on this call for nearly 2 hours, right? But I've made a sacrifice to stay with my son because I don't trust nobody else to raise him.
Which is, I wish many parents. So this is part of what we're talking about, the sense of responsibility. So because even ACS, the Department of Education calling ACS, there's a reason why they call ACS, because maybe it's the next step to prevent, to actually find a child who has not been in school for a while.
Oh, yeah. Of course, but I'm saying they call ACS on me. That's what I was saying. I'm doing the right things. I'm reaching out. I'm doing all of those things. So that's a flaw in the system. But there is a necessary place where they would have to. Me, that wasn't the case. I was trying for 4 months to go back and forth with you to communicate my needs and concerns about my child, which is the most precious thing that I've ever created in my life.
Which,
and they were not open to helping.
So I'm just, because
I agree with you. No, these things are necessary.
It's necessary, right? Because when you as a parent, you are not taking initiative. We could blame the system. We could blame a lot. We could have, let's assume you go to another country. You understand what I'm saying? The same flaws you find in America, which
of course they exist.
They existed.
Most countries don't even have public education.
They don't even have. There's some kids that America have school bus. When I was growing up, even in different countries in Africa, kids walk miles to go to school every day.
I know.
So
I know.
We have to then, start looking at ourselves. What is our responsibility?
I agree. 100%.
Which is what brought me to the idea of Pan-Africanism, community, and leadership development. You describe yourself as a student of African and chemotherapy. Your work demonstrates
everything black.
A commitment to African-centered solution to the community problem. And as a teacher and an organizer, a person, what African-centered solution do you believe is best, urgently needed for our community now?
Okay. So I would say I
don't want to actually, we could look at the past.
Of course, I got you. How we can implement it today.
But what do we need now?
What we need, so we haven't broached this subject in the conversation, but the concept of Ubuntu, the concept of I am responsible for you, you're responsible for me, I am you, and you are me. Some people call that each one teach one, right? In Kiswahili, we say umoja, unity. So for our community that is fragmented for many reasons, currently and historically, right? I think for us to get to where we need to go, we have to develop systems that are based on our African reality, African cosmology, because Africans don't have philosophy, right? We have lived cosmology. We are one with the universe. That is who we are. We are the first human beings on this planet. So we are Earth. We are the stars. We are the Milky Way. That's who we are. When we look at our cosmology and what we call today, simplified and call it the religion, African religions, it says all of those things. And even when we look at the 3 major Western religions, it's saying that. But we as a people have to create educational systems, governmental, political systems based on those ideas. The reason, one of the things that if we look at, right, the majority of PhD students, right, that graduate in this country that are Black and graduate right, from PhDs in the hard sciences or get MD degrees and become medical doctors. Do you know what schools they graduate from? 90% of our PhDs as African Americans, American Africans graduate from what type of university? What do you think?
It's maybe historical Black colleges.
Bingo. So point being, right, let's just take historically Black college, university, right, which many of my family members graduated from. And me, I'm a graduate of a predominantly Black institution, as I said earlier, Medgar Evers College. Those institutions protect young Black people, young adults, in so many different ways that go beyond academics, where you're comfortable, right? So if just that on the surface, we're still in a system of whiteness, right? We're still in their educational structures. We're still using their ideas, and our people evolve out of that and become successes, right? If that's the case, right, how is it possible? I think if we said, you know what, we're going to do, if we start like this, right, Saturday school, and we've had freedom schools in this country. We've had one-room shacks that we taught out of. My grandmother went to third grade in one. That's all my grandmother's schooling that she had, right? If we can create all these greatness from these hardships, right? Why can't we go back to those same models? Why can't we say, you know what? We might not have the time nor the money to have a full fleshed out school, right? But we can have a Saturday school in somebody's house.
That's right.
Right? Where we control what our children are learning, where we give them enrichment from the public schools that they're in, right? When we, then we can have our own curriculum, right? We can have, Kupagani Ngumi, which is an African martial art from East Africa. We can have, studies on Kemet. We can have studies on medieval Africa. We can have, and do it our way, right? Do it the way from our cosmological frameworks, right? Why can't we do that? We can do it. We've done it before inside the confines of this system. So that means we can do it again, but now in the age of information, artificial technology and robotics, we can take it to another level. So the thing is, one thing I like that what you said, Sister Sariki, is that we have to be responsible. And that's my message. Like, I'm not talking about the past to make it as a scapegoat or trauma as a scapegoat. I'm saying it because if we understand that past, then we can create a better present and, of course, an even better future. And I think that's where we have to get. Once we get outside of the box that we are currently in as individuals and as a collective, then we can. So that means you have to, at the pain of death, you have to learn certain things. You have to get up off your ASS and go to the continent. You have to sacrifice, because the only reason that the way I became like this before I took control of my own life as an adult is because of the sacrifices of my parents. If they do certain things, their children wouldn't be a certain way. Let me tell you. Then you can go ahead. My friend, him and his wife is from California. She's African American, and my friend is Haitian. They got married almost 10 years ago now. But you've been friends with my brother for almost 20 years, right? If I'm not over 20 years at this point. And so we kind of like all grew up together from our 20s to now and being in our 40s. And one thing, his wife always asking my mother, right? And I'm laughing because it's weird because how people see things, and you don't really understand sometimes how people see you until they start talking about you to other people. And she said, she called her Miss Felder, because her people from Louisiana, so she still got that Southern thing in her, even though she's from California. Miss Felder, I'm going to tell you, I love your sons. How did you raise these men, now they're men, into the men, these boys into the men that they are in here in New York City, through all of these things we know about? And they're so respectful and refined and gifted and talented. And my mother just says, we raise them how we raise children. That's how my mother says it. She's like, my mother's a very simple, down to earth woman. And that's how she said it. She said, we just stick with our children. My dad, he never left us. Even now, he's in the ancestral realm. He's never left us. My father told us, he said, look, when we started going to university, he said, I don't want you to worry about anything. I'm like, huh? What do you mean? He's like, we're going to pay for school. You're going to CUNY. You know what my tuition was? My tuition was like nothing compared to what students are paying today. I was in college. I got to look. Sometimes I have some of the old receipts, right? I think it was like $1,300 per semester, 6 credits or 12 credits. Excuse me, 12 credits. My father said, no, don't, son, don't worry. You don't have to get no job. Focus on your education. Focus on becoming a man that I want you to become, that you want to become now, right? I remember when I was 12 years old, my dad sat me down and said, son, I'm no longer giving you corporal punishment. Like, why, Dad? What happened? He was like, you at the age of reason. Dad, what's the age of reason? What do you mean? He said, that's the age that Jesus went into the temples about his Father above and his Father on earth. He went on that mission. He says, so now you know the difference between right and wrong. Those 12 circuits in your brain are connected. You understand what's good and what's not. So your life, son, it belongs to you now. That's how he said it. So that's a very African cosmological position on parenting from an African American, right? An American African. So how you raise your children, you shall know. And I speak in proverbs because we are proverbial people, right? You shall know the tree by the fruits that it bears. That's a reality.
And that's what is missing in many of our community, because in African tradition, people will know, even among the Yoruba, let me go back culture,
Yes.
they said,
Yes.
who are your parents?
Mm-hmm.
Parents raise their children so that their children will not bring them shame.
Yes, I know.
Okay.
I know.
In terms of the way they carry themselves.
Yeah.
In terms of dedicating
yes.
to their children upbringing and giving the best of the best that they could give to their
Yes.
even to the extent many of our children that we have parents at this time.
Shame.
They are online all the time on social media complaining about African. That brings me to victimhood versus empowerment.
Yes, the last
In our
section.
community,
Yes.
the tension between acknowledging the systematic racism and promoting personal responsibility is an ongoing debate.
Oh God, forever. It'll be long hair.
Many Black scholars, such as, I don't know whether you know about John Mark Waters.
Yeah, of course, John McWhorter. I'm a book dealer, of course.
Shelby Steele, Robert Woodson, who was part of the civil rights movement leader, Martin Luther King time, argued that a focus on victimhood is holding minority community back.
Yes.
What is your perspective on shifting from victimhood to empowerment and personal responsibility?
The victimhood that we are witnessing, right, in Black communities, no matter where we come from in the United States of America, is coming from having shame from having ancestors being enslaved and having being oppressed and having being put the Black stain of Black is. That's where that victimhood. So we're like, oh my God, I have to assimilate. So then what do? When people are in pain, what do? They self-medicate. We can self-medicate with sex. We can self-medicate with drugs. We can self-medicate with abhorrent other behaviors that we've talked about in this call. So I think when I'm saying that we have to take the reins of our communities back, we have to acknowledge the things that have happened to us from a certain perspective. And we have to take a African look at, and first that means we have to learn the African look if we've forgotten it. Because a lot of us, whether we've been through enslavement or not, or colonization or not, we're not practicing African culture every day. We're not living in the bosom of Africa. And sometimes that's the case on the continent, right? So sometimes we forget. I was reading something, I can't remember the whole context, but it was something about in the Igbo tradition, certain things have been forgotten. And then this Western colonial mindset is kind of like twisting it. So this whole thing with victimhood, right? When you feel disempowered, right? And you feel like you can get something from being a victim, or no other way to be. Can you imagine? I can't imagine being raised in a tenement or project and all I'm seeing all day is craziness and negativity. And what is that going to do to my psyche, right? I'm going to want to be that. If I'm a man, right? See, I'm a man. My father was a teacher, a professional. My mother was a homemaker. My grandmother was a reverend, right? And my big cousins are graduating from college, and I come of age, and we have a different world in the Cosby Show. right? Which is I'm explaining my reality, right? That's what I'm going to emulate. So now, how do you move somebody who their idea of manhood is putting a woman on the corner and pimping her out for money, or the other on the other end is selling some drugs, whether that be cocaine, heroin, or some other illicit materials on the street, or robber. Like I said, we are looking up to gangsters and drug dealers. We have rappers named him. 50 Cent was a criminal, not 50 Cent the rapper. He named himself after a criminal, right? We have Rick Ross. He named himself after a criminal, right? If John is my father and I'm John's son, I'm gonna reflect John. I'm his name. I'm John's son. That's where the name Johnson comes from, John's son, right? So now I'm gonna reflect what John did, right? So the so-called Jesus the Christ, physical father on earth was Joseph, right? Yusuf, that was his name. What his job was, he was a carpenter. Jesus was a carpenter, physical. If he existed in this world, his job description was a carpenter. And he became a carpenter of the soul and the mind of men. So the thing is, in our community, if we do not acknowledge the conditions in which we live under, if we do not acknowledge that we are an African people born outside of this mental space of Europeanism, right? This European psychological framework that we are practicing, if we do not acknowledge the destruction of our people and our losses that we have had, analyze them correctly. If we don't do those things on a global scale, national scale, and a local scale, our people will still be having this conversation in the year 3000, in the year 4000, in the year 4000, if we are still here. So we have to get back to us. We have to get to Ubuntu. We have to get to Umoja. We have Kwanzaa coming up. The 7 principles of Kwanzaa tell us everything to do. Koji Chagalia, collective work and responsibility. All of these things, the 7 principles, that's coming straight from East African language, Swahili. It's telling us what to do, but we have to envelop it. We have to become it. The reason why I can sit here, and it's not, I don't want people to believe that I'm arrogant or I know better than, but I have internalized for my identity is African. I'm American African because of my genetics, not because my mother is born in Kenya. No, because my whole socio-political understanding, my nationality, I have no African passport. I have a United States passport. So politically, I'm an American African. So how I see the world is through the lens of American Africans. How I deal with the world is from when I go to Ghana, I'm Nana Asare. That's where I was installed. It's Nana Asare-Nova the first. I didn't show up as, son of Bogo from Kenya, my grandfather's name. No, they said, no, you have to come home. This is your home. We want you here. Not because they want to exploit me. I'm not a rich man in terms of having millions of dollars, right? But they recognize that synergy because I've accepted myself. If you do not accept what you are, you do not know what you are. How the hell are you going to know who you are? You can't. How are you going to know how to educate your children? There's no morality. There's no values. There's no this, no that. So what are you going to do? I mean, look at this thing. One of my good friends, Brother Shambe, he runs a anti-violence program in Newark, New Jersey. Major, not Shambe Obadeli. Love that brother. And let me tell you, we have these conversations about the diaspora wars all the time. We have conversations about Black culture and the things that we have to do. Sometimes, we laugh and joke about it because it's better than crying. You want to be satirical, in your critique, right, of your own self. Because I'm not just critique. It's not just this critique. This conversation is for me and you, right? We're not saying we're better, right, and these people are worse. I don't think that's the conversation we're having. We're saying that we want better. So when we talk about victimhood, what are our individual responsibilities? The responsibility of every African, I will say, over the age of 21, right, is to do your best from what station you're at. But you have to become an African again. If you don't become an African again, everything you do is going to be confused. And that's our problem. See, me, I wake up in every day. I say, thank you, my African ancestors, for me being here. I say, I do everything in my life as an African. If I have a meeting, a job interview, or I have, something super important, going to court, traffic ticket, right? What do? I go get my bottle of, spring water, and I pour down libation and I talk to my ancestors. I do that, right? Because that's African, because that's what we are, right? This game that we're playing, and I'm so sorry that we have to have this conversation in English because it would be so much richer in Yoruba or Kikuyu. But
No,
these are things that we have to contend with.
But from even what you say, I'm going to even take it further in Yoruba tradition and the belief and the culture. Yeah. We have a saying called Ori Lonishe. That means Ori Lonishe, your head is the sense of your being.
Yes.
Onishe, your head is the sense of your being.
Yes.
Where your eyes is located for you to see, is where your nose is located for you to breathe. Is where your mouth is located for you to eat and say. Is where your ears are located.
Yes.
And you pray according to every aspect of this head, that whatever comes I see today, let it be of blessing.
Yes.
Whatever comes that I eat today, put in my mouth, or I say out, let it be of blessing. What comes through the ears, let it be of blessing.
But look at the names we give ourselves. Think about it. Even our names as African people.
Yes.
Our names are saying those things.
Those things already. It's very powerful, and we have to understand in our community. But when you have to start taking responsibility for whatever it is that you do, that whatever step you take is going to determine your future. I think maybe people will continue, will focus more on...
But it's simple, Sister Sariki. It's simple like this. If we can get up every day, 5 days a week, work overtime, go to a job that we hate, right? Sit around people that we do not like, some that look like us, some that don't, right? From various reasons, right? We pay taxes to a system that hates us. We participate in holidays that weren't created against us, but don't reflect our cultural identity at all. We go to a job that's 8 hours, 40 hours a week, sometimes overtime, 50 hours a week. If we can dedicate ourselves as adults to do those things for what we call our physical survival inside of a capitalist economic system, you're going to tell me we can't dedicate 3 hours a week? Listen, let's have real talk. This is big boy, adult, elder conversation. We can't dedicate 3 hours a week to do like a school program for our own kids, right? We can't sacrifice a few dollars to support an organization that's already doing that work and that our children might be able to go to. So I'm saying if we can dedicate all of these hours a week to becoming part and parcel part of the system that is very oppressive to us, right? Then ultimately the responsibility falls on us, because the responsibility to fix these ills don't rest in the White House, don't rest in the State House in Albany or any other state house across America, right? Even when, if and when reparations becomes a reality in this country for African people, African American, however you want to call yourselves, right? We call ourselves, right? It doesn't matter about that. Yes, cut the check. Everybody else, the people that imagine themselves as Jews and practice the Jewish religion from Eastern Europe, they got their check, so fine. But that's not the issue. We can have all the money in the world here. We can live in all the big mansions. But if this, as you said in the Yoruba statement, if this is not focused, if this is confused, if this is living through somebody else's lens, we talked about lenses. I have 4 of them. You have 4 of them. And then when you get old, you start getting 6 of them, because we have to get the reading, the bifocal, what they used to call bifocal, is the progressive. So if you don't have that sense, that mother wit, understand what you are. Notice I'm not saying who. What becomes before who? And we don't understand that, my sister. How can we come up out from under these complaints? Like you talking about African children are calling you to their parents and posting these things on social media, complaining about their parents, right? That's insanity. Without your parents, you wouldn't be here, stupid. No disrespect, right? They did something for you. Now, because they don't understand you in your American context, I understand you. I see where you're coming from, right? We always challenge the next generation, and the next generation always challenges the generation behind them. That's normal. But now You have to look at yourself and be critical. If you say, I'm an adult, I pay my bills, I work 40 hours a week, you hear it, right? So, okay, now, so why are you giving up who you are? What you mean, Pops? But you don't practice in your person, your culture. You think you somebody else. And that's what I'm seeing in you that I don't like, right? You are a version of me to go on into the next time. My children are so young. I'm born in the 20th century. My children are so young that they could be alive in the 22nd century as elders. So what I'm laying down today as an individual, as a parent, as a father, as a community person, like to call myself, as a cultural custodian of all African culture, of the encompassing of African culture, that is going to continue. Look at how I talk about my daddy today. Look at how I talk about my mama, my grandmother, my grandfathers, because they're part of me. I can't give them up. Not from a, and I'm not saying I'm them as a superficial. I mean, on the highest level, I am my father in the year 2025. I am him. People say, oh, I miss your father. You know what I tell them? You don't have the benefit of me. I have the benefit. When I want to see my father, I look in the mirror. But you can think about, read his work. But my point being is, you want to see my father? Come see me. You want to see the 21st century version of him? You have to deal with me. Go see my brother. Then when I'm gone, right? I'm gone. Come see my son and my daughter, because that's how, that understanding, that's reality, right? We evolve, right? If I want to see Sister Sariki after she leaves this realm, y'all gotta find your children.
Yeah.
I gotta find your work. Your children are your finest work, and that's how we should take it. But it starts with, any culture has to value itself and know itself. And the problem in our community is, you don't value yourself because you don't know yourself. You think people are saying, so a lot of those people, Thomas Sewell and all of these people, we got the other one is, she's insane. She's a GOP or Black sister. Her name escapes me at the moment. But you come in all this personal responsibility, but all the framework that you're positioning all of this on is to be like who?
You're talking about Candice Owen.
That nut. Excuse my French. I can say it candidly. This is a free country. Still, until it's not. But yes, right? You're talking all these things, but all your talking points are white supremacist. All your ideas, your cultural framework. The nuclear family is not the actual family. The nuclear family is a creation of your European mindset. The family is all of us. You're my family. You're my family. If you call me right now and say, Nana Asare, Brother Nova, I got this situation. These men are out my door. Yo, I got to call Brother Abdullah. I got to call Brother Robert. I got to call such and such. Yo, we going up to Sister Sariki's apartment. She got a problem right now. Drop what you're doing. That's our responsibility. You're our mother.
Thank you so much for that. We have to also understand we're living in a global world. America,
yes,
whether we like it or not, 60% or even over that, people of another color, and we all evolving with each other as human beings. You learn from people from different backgrounds, whether they're white, they're Asian.
You learn from everybody.
Because, we're all human community together. So that what brings knowledge, understanding of, how we function. Your children, when they grow up, they're going to work in corporate America.
Yeah.
And they're going to work with so many.
Corporate Africa, maybe.
Maybe. But you know what? They still have to, or the other, go to college with people from different backgrounds.
Yeah, of course.
Because that's how the global world works. And we want, even though we understand that history of colonization, history of slavery, we also have to let them know, just like the Jews, they understand what happened to them during the Holocaust.
You got to deal with it.
And they continue to deal with it, teach their children about that. That's why when you go into their community, they never ignore or leave their culture or their religion on the side.
That's the point.
Their children,
exactly.
They come
front and center
from the time of their bar mitzvah that they do for their children to go
their
through
rites of passage. Yes,
rite of passage. They never leave it. It's something that they're very deep about, and they teach their children to expand in the global world. And we have to understand that, even though we're talking about all this.
Where's our rites of passage?
It's a rite of passage, but we also have to understand we're living in a global world, and we have to take responsibility. It's part of what you took that responsibility to start the organization that you have. Baba, As a
Yeah,
young
Baba Inc. Yeah.
Baba, but you brought, you bringing the kids together as a leader, African children and African American children, for them to connect with each other.
Of course.
So can
Yeah.
you just, in closing, can you talk about the Baba program that you have? Because I know
Oh,
you have.
so okay, Black America, founding member of its board, and I'm also its educational director, right? So during the pandemic, I was in Ghana. Ghana and Kenya are my actual homes, right? And well, it's a whole story. We had a trip planned well before any of this COVID thing happened, right? So we get on a plane. They cancel our flight. This is March 2020, and there's all these rumblings that, oh, U.S. might close its borders. They're gonna do, blah, blah, blah. I've never lived through a global pandemic. They canceled our flight, put us up in a hotel in Jersey, and we went off, and it was just some weird energy. They were like, and we flew with Air Ethiopia. I always try to fly African if I can, right? An African airline going home. And they were giving us so much pushback. You guys are not Ghanaians. Only Ghanaians can come into Ghana because of what's going on. We challenged them. I said, I'm a Ghanaian. Let me tell you, you're not stopping me from going home. So they came back. They went to their supervisors like 10 minutes. They said, these people said they're not leaving. These people going to their home. So they came with some waivers. We had to sign these things, whatever happens. And so we left. And I'm just telling it because it's surreal now. We landing, and as we are landing, the United States is declaring an emergency, state of emergency because of the pandemic. As we are landing, Ghana is saying, no, that's it. We're closing our borders. We literally were on the last domestic or international flight to land into Ghana. So we thought, scheduled for 3 weeks to a month to be here. This will be all taken care of by then. Ghana didn't open its borders until September 2020. Yeah. So, those of us that traveled on that flight and many others before that flight, us repatriates, we were in Ghana for those 9 months, 8 to 9, 10 months. And why I'm bringing that up is because this is how I got in contact with Abdullah Sise, because what happened was the United States was sending all of these, and it doesn't surprise me. They were sending all of these patriotic flights to bring back, no, this is the Trump administration, to bring back their citizens from India,
wow,
from Brazil. I mean, hundreds of flights, right? Now, like I told you, politically, right? I'm an American. When I travel in the world, I have an American passport. Where I can have all the African names I want. When that passport comes up, it's the United States of America. Place of birth, New York City. That's what's on my passport, right? I can't change that. Even if I ever get a passport for another country, it's going to say place of birth, New York City, right? That's our reality. So we were doing this. So they sent 2 flights, and it took a tremendous amount of political pressure from those of us in Ghana and those of us in the States to say, like, there's thousands of African Americans that are citizens and permanent residents in the United States that want to come back. They're concerned about their families, family members are dying. It's all types of stuff that was happening. So I started like just on my own, like, you know what, through WhatsApp, and you probably were in some of those groups, right? Facebook, Instagram. We started advocating because we go down to, like we went so far as to go to the state apparatuses in Ghana to like, yo, you can't, people are not getting their medication, right? There's people, there were so many things that people that were used to going back and forth between the states, and I'm sure other countries in the West, like the UK and Germany, the Netherlands, people that were used to going back and forth couldn't do it. And they got their lives, even though we're African and we're repatriating and we're working that end to try to come back home permanently. We're writing letters to Congress people. I'm writing letters to the senator. I'm emailing the senator from Idaho. So me doing all of that, I met or got closer to Brother Robert Jackson, right? Because he liked what I was doing. He got me an interview on New York One. I think it was either in July or August of 2020 to talk about these issues with the reporter that interviewed me. They played some of it on New York One. And from there, he sent it to different people in New York, Harlem, the Bronx, across the city, whatever. And he said, yo, I got this brother. He want to interview you on the same topic on his Instagram channel. So I was like, ah, yo, hook it up. And he introduced me, Robert Jackson introduced me to Abdullah Cisse, who is our executive director and founder of Baba. And he interviewed me, and then he told me about the idea of bridging Africa and Black America. And I was like, well, I am bridging Africa and Black America, right? Literally in the flesh, right? One African parent. So I thought it was a beautiful idea. The interview was good. It's still on I think his personal, if not the organization's page. And from there, like it's just a natural relationship between those of us. He had a WhatsApp group you're in, very active in so many different ways. And it just evolved from there. It just like we became friends, good friends. He's been to my son's baby shower, his first birthday. He's been to my daughter's birthdays. He's come out, I've come out, he just had another child. They're doing something this weekend. And so it was a natural synergistic relationship. Other people in that group were on the board or weren't on the board. And what we started, and I think officially with New York State registration, 5013C, that might have been like 2022 or 2023. So it took some time, but we've done work. The bad fire at Twin Park Towers that happened with, I think, 19 of our brothers and sisters perished in that fire. So we started getting involved in first thing we did, and I think that was our first big action as a organization was Abdullah is like just a special resource. He somehow gets $60,000 worth of goods, materials, furniture, microwaves donated from the DOE. I don't know how he did it. He did it. So he's like, yo, I got these 2 warehouses full of all of this stuff. We're talking about toiletries. We're talking about underwears. Everything you can imagine that a household needs was in those 2 storage units. And these were the biggest storage units I had ever seen. One was look the size of half of a warehouse, right? And we had all of these things. So he said, yo, what are we going to say? Yo, we got to distribute this stuff. What do you think? So I came up there in my van. We start organizing it. We start putting people. We got another organization that was helping us bring people that were affected by that fire and survived, but couldn't go back to the building readily. We helped. We did an event with It's From the Soul, an organization we partnered with that they do shoes and sneakers and things. And we gave out one at the one of the community centers in Community Board 6, I think that's what it was. In the Bronx, we gave out 200 plus pairs of sneakers. Right, we did all of these things. We gave out the majority of those goods, and everybody had got evolved again and brought it to a school. People would come, it's different people from the community, and started giving out the goods that were going to benefit the people. We would, pick people up. We had another organization, I can't remember their names, out of Queens, that would come with they got these big vans. We're bringing the people from the fire to the storage that's on the Bruckner, right? We're bringing them there and taking them back home with the goods. So like we did that. So that was like our first big act, right? And being there and shedding light, and we were very vocal about how wrong what was going on, right? In terms of the city and its fire inspection and letting these slumlords keep doing what they've been doing to our communities. And we just, that was the first act. Then that led us to getting involved with the Red Cross, doing fire safety training. A lot of our communities lack that fire safety training. Simple things like knowing what type of house you live in, wood frame, knowing what type of building you live in. If you're in a concrete building built after 1970, it's most likely a fireproof building. Knowing what's the building's fire plan, creating, if you live in a private house, creating your own fire plan. There's also the Red Cross partnering with them. We did installations of, families in the Bronx and different areas in Harlem of fire detectors and smoke detectors. That's just practical, everyday things that could save a life. And speaking to that, tonight, it's the 19th of December, 2025. We're going to our dear friend and sister, Ojani Fori, that we affectionately call PJ, perished in a fire on Thanksgiving in New Jersey, Orange, New Jersey. So that's why we started those things, to do that. And then we continue to evolve today. And when our migrant brothers and sisters were coming from all over West Africa to here in the streets of New York, We put together a English language program. Many of them were never spoken English. They come from the Francophone, French-speaking nations, former colonies of the French in West African states. So we did that for, we're still doing it. We have another reiteration that's happening in the Bronx. The first iteration, we did an Africana in Harlem, led by our sister Adama Ba. We did first iteration there. We're in about our third or fourth iteration of the program, continuing it, open to people, especially those that just came here to the United States that need English language services. Also, the first iteration, we did civic training as well, teaching about the American political system to recent immigrants. And we just continue, and we've had more than a dozen or so community conversations about how can we work together as a multi-ethnic family, in better terms, here in New York City, in New York State, the country, and of course in the global community. That's our name, Bridging Africa and Black America. A bridge is more than an olive branch. It's something that's permanent. It's something that goes both ways. And that's our baby, and we raised her or him, and we want to keep growing that vision, because we think if you want to go fast, you go by yourself.
Yeah.
You want to go far, go together with the clan, with the family, and that's our idea. Guiding light is that unity. Baba Unity is our website's name. Baba Unity is our Instagram. So we believe in us unifying as a people and using the practices of Ubuntu. And the practice of Ubuntu is found in Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Taoism, Buddhism. It's all this. Ubuntu is not anything spooky. This is us as a people recognizing the power that each of us have and the responsibility that each of us have to each other. And that's how we keep, moving forward. And we got some things to come in 2026, and continuing the work that we're doing in the language part, education part, youth services, portion of our programming and community conversations. We're even going to step that up even more because of diaspora wars that is spurred on by powers that be, the U.S. government. We have the documentation from 1978, the Carter administration. They do not want African Americans and continental African people to be together. It is one of the greatest threats to the Western world. You can just go look it up, Google it. It's there. It's an official declassified document, and read it. So in this time when we're online going at each other's throats, which doesn't make any sense, chat bots controlling these conversations, and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram just instituted this, I don't know technically how it works, but before you could kind of post and not really post where you're posting from. So now when you post, it has to show where you're posting from. Their algorithm got it to the point, no matter what VPN you're using, they're going to know where you're at, right? And they found almost 70% of Black posts that were getting involved in Black relationship speak, which usually turns out very negative, right? And this ADOS FBA versus everybody else Black, which we call the diaspora wars. We found these posts are coming from places like Indonesia, India, right? Other places in the world that you're like, right? And just before we end, I wanted to say something because it was on my mind when I saw the list of questions that you asked me. So there's another debate that is brewing out of diaspora wars. And I think the brother's channel is Zanu. I don't know if you're familiar with it. ZANU, saying that.
Yes, man. Sure.
Right. That African Americans don't have culture. And I liked how he presented it, but I'm going to issue a challenge to Brother Zanu. And as everybody else, you saying African Americans or American Africans, as some of us call ourselves, don't have a culture. It's almost the same thing as saying African people don't have a culture, right? Because in my studies, officially, academically, and on my own as a world traveler, one thing that I have understood without even necessarily reading a book on it, I have read books on it, but before I even had that understanding, that wherever I went in the world, African people had a community, no matter what they called themselves, no matter what religion they practiced, right? As a spiritual faith, all those Africans were practicing the same culture. So my Jegna from Mega Everest College is my brother, Clinton Crawford. And one thing we always talked about is that African culture is like a river, right? And that river, right? We can compare it to the Nile or the Amazon or the Zambezi or Niger River, right? Which Nigeria is named after, has many tributaries. But it's one river, and other rivers and streams and things. That's what African culture is, right? How can we say African Americans don't have culture when the culture that America acknowledges, the only things that America acknowledges as its culture that can be exported as cultural phenomenon, Africans that were here in this country not didn't create it, right? It already existed. They used whatever spices and trials and tribulations that was here, and they just did African culture from that way. We talk about jazz, we talk about blues, all their pentameters and all musical expressions in those art forms come from Africa, right? When my grandmother used to tell us about, yeah, at night, you ever wake up and you can't move? I'm like, yeah, grandma. Yeah, let me tell you, that's the witch riding you. The hag is on you. Grandma, that's a story to tell children and the boogeyman. Those stories are our stories, right? When we talk about the tortoise and the hare, that's an African story. These are our stories. When we talk about the first physician, literally the first herbalist and physician in America is a black man. So when we the black inventors, those things are not, those are all of those actions academically, socially, politically, even the idea of the United States of America is an African idea. Red, white, and blue does not come from France, does not come from Russia, does not come from the UK. The red, the white, and the blue originally is the world's first flag from ancient Kemet. It is really red, blue, and white. It is what we call in Kemetic studies, Smatawi. It's the unification, umoja, the unity of Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Upper Egypt represented by white, Lower Egypt represented by red. The blue represents the Nile River. All three together represent the unity of those 42 nomes, those 42 states that created what we know as ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet, as a nation state, which was 42 separate Africans working together as a family, working together as a nation. Sometimes we rotate the kingship, we rotate the stool between, some days the Yoruba take it, some days the Kikuyus take it, some days, this group from Zimbabwe take it, because we were one people. So to say in that debate that there's no African American culture, we don't have taboos, of course we have taboos. To say that we don't have certain cultural phenomenon, that's grossly inaccurate and short-sighted, because we're using a European lens, European education, European worldview to look at ourselves. And no, right? And you're on the YouTube debating a non-anthropologist, a non-sociologist. That's not a debate. You're stacking the deck and not really even yourself as a cultural anthropologist, not understanding the reality that you're in. We are one African people with many different expressions of that Africanness. That's what we are. At the end of the day, ultimately, right? Look at me and you, right? We're the same color. Our hair is the same. Our voice and expression is the same. We're born at different times. We're born in different places in the world, but we're the same people. And that is, like my last enduring message of this conversation is to understand yourself, understand what you are, love yourself, love your people. Don't get caught up in these games that our oppressor wants us against each other so that we can't grow as a family, right? One thing that in marriage, people always tell you, don't let other people into your inner business between you and your spouse, because they're going to not understand. You're going to be angry at your spouse, then you're going to go back to your spouse, and then you're going to leave a negative connotation, right, with that family member or friend about the person that you're with, that you're not going to leave right easily. It's like, our people have to understand, we have to stop letting other people in our business. We have to understand that we have to solve our problems. That doesn't mean that we don't advocate for reparations. That doesn't mean that we don't become city council people. That doesn't mean that we don't participate in the system that is taking our tax dollars and oppressing us with it. We have to control those tax dollars. We have to control our communities. I don't know about anybody else because every group I know, the Arabs control their community, Eastern European Jews control their community, the Irish control their community, the Italian. I was just in Little Italy in the Bronx yesterday. They control it to this day. They control Little Italy, and I mean physically. I'm not talking about culturally, right? So we have the same responsibility as a people. So learn who you are, know who you are, and with that, there's one thing I wanted to tell you before we end it, right? And I think we can do another conversation about this because I would love to have the conversation in that those same working groups that Brother Robert and Abdullah and me have been in over the years. I met a brother named King Fode. King Fode is a Gullah Geechee from South Carolina. The Gullah Geechee are an amalgamation African people from West Africa and Central Africa and the Congo region, Angolan region of Africa, right? They are the people that cultivated rice. You know, Uncle Ben's, you know, all of these other big rice American companies. African people brought that rice cultivation cultures here to these United States. But the Gullah Geechee people, brother Zanu, understand this, have retained, I would say 95%, if not more, of their Africanness genetically. And my dad actually, and my father's a Gullah Geechee, but that's another conversation. But now, King Fode, we have very good synergy in these work groups that we're in together on WhatsApp or Facebook. And about a year ago, so I've known him about 5 years, right? Online. He lives in Sierra Leone. He repatriated back to our home. He says just on the, sidebar on WhatsApp, he's like, yo, I think we finally can. I think we can. Your spirit, your energy, that name Felder is in my family. I say, all right, cuz, all right. That's how we do. Me, I personally call it a plantation cousin. I've met a lot of people that I've shared kinship with and energy with that have the same last name that I've met in Harlem, that I've met in other places. We stay connected. And I call them plantation cousin, right? Because that's a Black person, that's not a usual name to have, Felder, right? So over the summer, he said, I found our oldest African Felder here in the United States. Was like, say what, brother? He said, yeah. So he starts emailing me, texting me all of the information. And then before that, he had sent me information about, he did his ancestry through 23andMe and Ancestry.com. And he found cousins, even family, fifth cousins, right, in West Africa. One in Nigeria, one in another country, I think Guinea-Bissau or something like that. And I was like, wow. So I was, he's a researcher. He's written a book on the Gullah Geechee people too, available on Amazon. Go check my cousin out. But now he tells me about Norso Carmida Felder. It's like, yo, who is this ancestor? It sounds like some. And I said, Norso. So where's that name from? I looked it up. Igbo land. Okay, Igbo land. Igbo roots in America. They took a lot of our people from the East, right? And so then fast forward to about October, he texts me, oh, let me see what cousin's talking about. So I scroll, and he sent me our family tree, and he pinpointed our relationship via ancestry all the way to my father. There were some details that I know that were wrong, and I filtered in. I said, oh no, this is the year of my father's birth. This is when my uncle was born. This is when my grandmother was born. But he found it. But that whole day, Sister Sariki, I was just in thought. I was cried several times about my African family in America. It was surreal. And it was, and I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. It was surreal, right? And we share the same fourth great grandfather. I was just like, wow, we found our family. That I sent it to everybody. I have a Felder Family Forever group. I still have my other group with my family and Beyond family group. I shared it. I sent it to my cousins down south. I sent it to my cousins up here. I just sharing it. And the other questions came out of it. But, and I just wanted to say, I had traveled. The first place I went to Africa on my own as an adult was in Nigeria. Of course, we went to Badagry, we went to Yoruba land, of course. We met the Oba of Badagry back in that time, 2000, 90s, whatever it was. And he apologized for the slave trade and the portion that our people, you see, I said our people had in it, and that was beautiful. And then later on, we studied at the University of Nigeria in Suka. That was our hub where we took our classes, and we went all over the country. And one thing that my professors were Igbo, Finding out my roots are Igbo too, right? Now I'm finding that out. This is the first time publicly I'm saying it, right? I've talked to friends and family about it, but this is the first time on a public platform that I'm saying it. And we went and got these names, right? They did a naming ceremony in the Igbo tradition. And I just remember the woman, the sister, the queen mother looked at me. And, this is a much more younger, I don't know if I've ever been Demir, but, I was 20 years old, right? Different part of my life, different mindset. And the woman said, you are Ukechuku. What's that? I said, what's that? And the woman said, Queen Mother said, you are the power of God. You are the power in you, son. And you're going to see it. It's going to come. You already have it. So you see so this idea that we're not one people is insane.
That's so powerful.
How can I be sitting here with you, with Ikichukwu, with Nana Asari on a stool, like with my people in Ghana? The same people. So this idea that we're not the same people, it troubles me, this debate. And I know it troubles me, but I understand that the majority of our people do live together, do marry each other, do work things out, are an African family on the continent and here in the United States, in the UK too, in the Western world too. Wherever we at, we're one people. And that's the energy that's going to these problems that we talked about today in the section where we spoke about family, education. Those problems are going to be solved by us together as a family. Because what you don't have, Sister Sariki, I might have.
Yeah.
And what I might not have, you may have. And so we have to put the haves and the have-nots together to make a whole have, to make the whole thing. We have to do that. And that's the mission that I think, my life is about, like connecting those dots. I'm born in the 3, so the 3 is a natural connector. And I just think that's my role, is to connect people, right? To connect the dots and continue to work on my father, my grandfather, my aunties, my grandmothers, in that movement from Harlem to continue. My elders are elders now.
And you're doing it. You're doing it. Thank you so much. You're doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Elders are elders, and they moving. And we have to replace them. And you're doing it too. You're doing it as an elder. And it's not easy as an elder.
Yes.
We respect you so much, Sister Sariki. Thank you for even considering me. When you text me, I was like, is this fishing? I was like, oh no, this is Sister Sariki. It's not somebody fishing. Did somebody hack her account?
Yes. Thank you so much, brother Asare-Nova Felder. Thank you for sharing your journey and your wisdom. And today's conversation reminds us that understanding our history, embracing our identity, strengthening our community goes hand in hand, like you said. And as we move forward, may we choose empowerment over victimhood, unity over division, and action over complacency. So today we heard not just idea from our brother, but a call to take responsibility, to connect rather than division, to mentor our youth, to learn our history, to build something lasting. So to our listener, let this not be something that we're going to forget about. This is not the end. Let's volunteer. Let's organize. Let's read more, like our brother has been saying.
Please read.
Okay? Let's mentor. Let's donate. Let's teach. Let us show up. Because, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a village to pull everything together. Every one of us has a role of shaping the future. The time for action is now, and thank you for tuning in to our listener. If this conversation resonates with you, please share it with your family, your friend, the community group. Be sure to follow, subscribe, and leave a review to help the podcast reach more listeners. Your support allows us to bring more conversation like this that are grounded in community empowerment. Until next time, stay well, stay informed, and take care of yourself.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Ponzo Ponzo Live Podcast. We hope to have you back with us in the next episode as we continue to explore the nuances of the African immigrant experience. If you'd like to connect with us, you can email us at talk@ponzoponzo.org. That is talk@pansapansa.org. And follow us on Instagram at pansa.pansaforum. Until next time, remember to spread kindness and love. Thank you and take care of yourselves.